Yo,
Yo, what's up, dude?
Peter. Yeah. Boomski's in the chat.
Let's get it. Oh, I should probably turn my phone volume off.
I should probably mute the stream. Where is it even coming from?
Yep. That too.
Oh, go away, voice. I don't like this. I don't know where the stream is pulled up on my computer. Okay, we're good. I have way too many windows open. Yeah, there's way less of a delay too.
Yeah, well, I made it. That's also part of it, though. I think that might be part of the reason why I have issues with the frames dropping. I made it like ultra low latency because I want it to be as live as possible. But
Yeah.
If it winds up being a problem, then I will probably just have to not do that. But we'll play it by ear, see how it goes. But you have
Oh boy. Oh
first
boy.
pick
All right.
tonight.
Let me get my bearings really quick. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do something different just to make the draft board pan out a little different. I know that. Let me. I'm just not
I have a
prepared.
feeling there's going to be a lot of things different, frankly, in this draft compared
Oh
to
yeah, for
last
sure.
week's already. But
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be
these first
up
few weeks
until
are always going to be crazy because it's a lot of stuff where, especially with the
There's
combine
like
happening right now. Again, we've talked about this before. The combine shouldn't really have that much of an impact on people. Game film should matter a lot more, but there's
right,
some guys that are going to work themselves into going significantly higher because of their combine performances, and some teams really value that more.
right. It's also before free agency, so
Correct. So
that's a
it's,
huge.
there's an extent to which it's hard for us to do anything right now, and things will certainly shift and change as things get addressed, needs get addressed, and things like that. Obviously, if one of the top 3 teams addresses quarterback in free agency, there's a relatively decent chance that they probably stay away from quarterback
Right.
in the draft. Obviously, depending on who it is. Obviously, if the Giants sign Jameis Winston, that's not going to stop them from drafting a quarterback at 3. But anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even if someone signed, like if the Browns signed Kirk Cousins, I think we talked about that last week. Like, I mean, there's nothing stopping them from still taking Cam Ward. I mean,
Oh yeah.
if they like Cam
And you
Ward
can
or
get replaced halfway through the season again, and
correct.
you
All right, so Titans, a good old home team for me. I guess if you want to call them that, home team, but not favorite team.
I'm gonna get him the Nate Bargatze treatment. Bargatze, whatever his name is pronounced as, probably.
Yeah, I actually I think that was the route I was gonna go. Yeah.
Let's go.
Which it's not super spicy. We go back to back weeks with arguably the best player in the draft, depending on how you look at it. Whatever edge rushers definitely that premier position over corner or wide receiver, but that's the thing, corner or wide receiver, like he gives you so much versatility that is he going to do it in the NFL? We talked about that last week too. It depends on what team he goes to. I find it hard to believe that he would be doing both full time. I don't think he could do it long term. A couple years, could he do that? Sure, but if he really wants to, have a 10, 15-year career, which I know at wide receiver and corner 15 is probably too much, but possible. If he just wants to have short 5, 6, 7 years of doing both, probably going to have some injuries in there, which happens. But if you're doing both at this level, at least full time, I just don't see it happening. So, but the Titans are interesting with Travis Hunter because, I mean, they could use both positions. Corner wise, they have what's his name from the Chiefs last year? I'm drawing a blank. That they traded for. Man, it's Snead. Yes, Snead. He had a down year, which I think he was hurt a little bit last year, and a new scheme. So he wasn't horrible, but he definitely was not the same player he was the year prior. But besides that, I mean, they drafted Brownlee last year, who has looked pretty good. I think they got him like the 4th round last year, which is a pretty good value. He was better than I thought he was going to be, but they need another weapon besides Ridley as well. So it would be pretty open on what he would be doing. If you're taking him at 1, I mean, and you don't have a quarterback in place either, and you're kind of in that like tank mode still. I mean, sure, like if they go get Stafford, which I don't know that Stafford would want to go there, or Rodgers. I mean, maybe if they pay him enough money, and they tell him, hey, like, we're going to get Travis Hunter,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get, we're going to try to go sign somebody, Chris Godwin. They still have Calvin Ridley, which I think I'm higher on than most people. I think he could still be a really solid wide receiver. I think you'd probably want him to be your wide receiver too, ideally.
Yeah.
But I think he still has a lot of juice left because, I mean, he missed a few years. He came out kind of older. He's only played, 5 seasons or so, maybe, of actually starting.
Something like that.
So
But
it
he's
maybe,
had his
I
share
mean,
of injuries and all that. Like,
right,
it's tough
right,
with Ridley because of the fact that he, like you said, missed some time. They signed him to be a number one. The money that they're paying him is number
oh
one
yeah,
at the time. You can make an argument now that it's number two money, but it's something where, again, addressing this in the draft is what you want to do because
right,
you get a player on a lesser salary. You get a guy that's gonna get people talking about you again in a
right.
positive light, hopefully, as opposed to a negative light, which is what most of their media attention I feel like has been as of late. Um,
And you go back to the generational talent. Like,
mm-hmm.
I mean, he's one of those players that would fit that bill. Whether you use him at corner or wide receiver, you do kind of a 60% one, and then he's on the field 40, like split him up some, like a situational thing. I think that's fine. Just get him on the field. Like your offense can use him, your defense can use him. He's that player that you draft that could be the face of your franchise or one of the faces of your franchise and not be a quarterback. Like he's that type of player.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like you said, that's what Tennessee needs. They kind of had that with Derrick Henry. He was kind of like that guy for them,
Yep.
and they've lost Derrick Henry. They haven't had that guy at quarterback, so they've been carried by a few really good defensive pieces. I know they've had some solid offensive linemen, but that's kind of what it was. It was like Derrick Henry was like that big piece, and now he's not there. Obviously, Levis doesn't look like he's going to be that big piece for them. And they just have a lot of guys that don't have that star. And
Yep.
he steps in day one, and I think he's immediately probably going to be the biggest star on that team. So, yep, I'll lock that in.
Perfect. I like it. I think that and again, we're not at the point at this juncture where we're doing trades, we're doing things like that. I think that there's a real chance that the Titans just have an all-out bidding war between the Browns and Giants for that number one pick.
Yeah.
Obviously, it remains to be seen what actually happens on draft day, but they're kind of in a position like we talked about now. We gave them Abdul Carter last week, gave them Travis Hunter this week. PFF has their top need as quarterback, and there's a real world in which that is their number one pick, is going quarterback, and that's something that we haven't done yet. And I think, personally, I'm doing that for a reason. I'm kind of a firm believer in building your team up first and then adding a quarterback later. And the counterpoint to that is saying, okay, well, you have the first overall pick this year. What are your chances that you get the first overall pick again next year? And that's not
Right.
necessarily a great thing. You obviously don't want to be in this position 2 years in a row. But at the same time, are any of the quarterbacks this year worth that number one overall slot selection? And looking at next year's class at this point, again, obviously things can change year to year, but we'll see what happens. There's certainly guys that, were well high regarded one year, decided to come back for their senior year as a junior and tanked the year after. And that's certainly something that we could see happen again going into 2026. But I think that the depth at the quarterback position in that draft class is significantly better than obviously what we have in this draft. But even the top end talent here, I think, would slot in relatively low in next year's draft class. We looked at that last year too. I mean, we collectively, you and I have done a board of what the quarterbacks would look like if all the quarterbacks from this year's draft were in last year's draft class, knowing what we know now, having them play that extra season, whatever. And there's at least 5, if not 6 quarterbacks from last year's class that are above any of the guys in this class. Again, for a team that is more quarterback needy, like the Giants certainly are at this point, they're in a situation where, again, Brian Daboll's there. How much time does he have left? Joe Shane, how much time does he have left? they kind of need to take a guy this year to play for them. And again, like we talked about last week a little bit, and I'm sure we'll touch on as we get to it, Cam Ward probably is not the guy that you really want to start this year. He's probably a guy that you're going to want to be able to sit for a year, develop more, figure out what he has going on, and just sit behind a guy that is going to be good for his development too, somebody who is a mentor to him. Whereas Shedeur Sanders is probably the safest floor guy to step in right away and just start. So, again, we'll get to that pick in a little bit here, but if you are the Giants, knowing that you need a guy to start for you right away, and you're going to have to force Cam Ward into that situation, and again, we'll talk about this later, maybe Cam Ward is the right guy for the Giants situation because he's used to playing behind a piss-poor offensive line, but you know, you need to make that decision, and you need to have the cards in your hand to be able to make that decision. And for the Browns, maybe they're thinking the same thing. They're saying, okay, well, we have a relatively decent roster. Again, you're probably losing Myles Garrett, but you figure that the trade compensation is going to be significant enough that it hopefully helps to offset that loss. I don't see a world where Myles Garrett plays on his current contract, and it really sounds like he's not interested at all in coming to the table to sign an extension with them, which kind of plays in my next selection. I'm not going to bury the lead here. I'm going to take Abdul Carter for him. I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. Again, like I'm talking about through this situation, they're going to lose Myles Garrett, it looks like right now. I don't really see a world where they retain him, given his frustration with the organization. Where he goes, I don't know. What they get back, I don't fully know either. I know that there's been conversations amongst Eagles fans that maybe they would trade Nolan Smith as part of a package for him. I think that the Commanders are a good fit. I think the Lions are a good fit. I think there's a handful of teams that would be a great fit. There's a lot of teams that could use edge rusher. The Bills, 100%. So again, you're just looking at what is it that those teams are going to give up.
I'll be honest, and this could even be an exercise we do, a few weeks down the road. If the trade doesn't happen yet, obviously if it happens, then we won't have to. But exploring who could, be that team and even make that trade happen in a mock just to see what could happen. I would think, from what I've seen and just kind of looking at past trades of similar valued players at his age, I mean, he's not old, but at his age, I would be shocked if it's not at least, if it's not 2 1s, if it would need to be a 1 and 2 2s at least. But I wouldn't be shocked if someone, because it's going to be someone sending a late one, right? Like it's probably going to be because he wants to go to a good team. Mm-hmm. So it'll be one of these teams sending, pick 30, 32, 28. Mm-hmm. They might even ask for 2 firsts and then a second, and tell me that that's not worth it, sending 2 late firsts and a late second for someone like Myles Garrett. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but if I was the Eagles, the Bills, like you said, the Commanders, one of these teams that the Commanders are a little bit riskier because, they haven't been up in that. I'd have a hard time not saying yes to wanting to do that if I was one of those teams and I had the cap room and kind of had that fit going on. So, and yeah, kind of like you said, the Eagles could throw in a player. Maybe you don't have to give up all that capital, but some of those teams don't really, the Eagles might be the only team that has that luxury to give up someone like that and then add that to the trade. I mean, because most of those teams need an edge rusher so bad they can't really give one back. Maybe they can give someone else in a different position, but yeah, dude, I agree. I don't think Myles is sticking around. I think he's probably gone.
Yeah, I think he's got one foot out the door already.
And good for him, honestly.
100%. Good for me also as a Steelers fan. Get him the fuck out of the division. But,
yeah.
I've seen rumors now that the Eagles said if the Commanders make a trade or an offer for him, that they're going to make an offer so good that the Browns can't possibly refuse. I have no idea what that means, frankly. Maybe we
3 firsts, maybe. If Watson goes to 3 firsts, why not Myles? Why not Myles?
Yeah, I mean, 3 firsts to lock down, again, with that specific team, you're looking at locking in a guy who could be there for 1,
5,
2, or
7.
3 Super Bowls in the process during those 3 first-round picks that you're giving up, that window,
Yeah.
that's probably worth it. Um, their defensive line is already good enough as it is, and they wreaked havoc on the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, which could be a testament to the Chiefs' offensive line being not good. But,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's just something you have to consider. Maybe that's something that we can do as a video together at some point, looking through
Yeah,
different
for sure.
trade scenarios for Myles Garrett, that we could put out
Yeah.
a video on that. And then again, in the draft streams to come, maybe we make those hypothetical trades and kind of
For sure.
work through some of the different options that would be on the table, looking at what the realistic cost could be to give up. And again, certainly we're liable to be wrong on that. I think that there's been a good number of trades where the valuation that we would have on a particular player is nowhere close to what they actually went for.
Mm-hmm.
Personally speaking, if you asked me to tell you what Chase Claypool would have gotten traded for when he got traded, again, as a Steelers fan, I'm thrilled that we got the 32nd pick in the draft. Shout out to Chicago and Ryan Poles for that. But I would have guessed he was worth like a 4th-round pick at that point.
Yep.
So I was happily surprised on that regard. But we can certainly look through what some of those options might look like for the Browns to go ahead and make those decisions. I personally would despise if they got Abdul Carter. I would be pissed because I obviously, as a both Penn State and Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I like Abdul Carter a lot, and watching him go to the worst organization in professional sports would be very upsetting for me. But also a division rival would also be equally upsetting. So I will turn it over to you for the Giants pick here.
Indeed. Yeah, so, man. The Giants, you feel like, and I know we definitely talked about this last week too, like whether it's free agency or draft, like they might be the team that absolutely has to come away with some sort of answer at quarterback. Like, the Titans can go and say, we're not rebuilding, but we all know they are. Get some vet for 1 year, a bridge. The Browns, if they somehow don't land it, they could just very well be like, oh, well, we still have Deshaun Watson, and this is just a bridge until he comes back. I would not buy it, but they could technically use that if they don't land anybody.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants, though, I mean, Dayball and GM that I can't think of his name right now. Shane, yeah, they're on thin ice. So they have to produce this year. And is a rookie quarterback going to do that? I don't know. I think Dayball's a good coach. I think they have some pieces in place. If you look at Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy looked pretty good for a later round pick. Their offensive line isn't as bad as it has been in the past. I think they have a couple pieces now to work with. Obviously, I'm not really sure about Evan Neal, and Andrew Thomas is just a health concern. But when he plays, he's easily a top 10 tackle in my opinion. So my thing here is I think it's likely that Cam Ward goes before Shedeur. Part of me thinks that they would go Shedeur because he could start day one easier. And that might be silly, but I just think that they're on such a time clock.
Mm-hmm.
That I could be wrong, and they could think Cam Ward is a day one starter. And Cam Ward could be a day one starter. I mean, he's gone from 3 different, he went from 3 completely different schools in college and was a day one starter at each place he went to, learned the offense, picked it up. He plays a little bit too much hero ball. Like, he relies on things that he's probably not going to be able to rely on in the NFL. I think he has a really good arm, but he doesn't have that elite arm. But he kind of plays that way, like he does have an elite arm. And in college, he can kind of get away with it. The NFL, I just don't think he doesn't have that Mahomes, Josh Allen, Stafford arm.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's closer to like a Phillip Rivers arm, which is a funny thought, but their throwing motion reminds me they're very similar. But I think he has the same sort of pop, which might be surprising because people go, oh well, Phillip Rivers doesn't have that strong of an arm. Well, when Philip Rivers was coming out of college, he had a solid arm.
Yeah.
Don't think about 40-year-old Philip Rivers throwing ducks at Indianapolis. That's a different Philip Rivers. But anyways, I don't know, man. It seems more likely to me every day that Stafford might actually be traded, and I would be absolutely shocked if he went for the third overall pick. I think that's a bogus rumor, in my opinion. But if they get Stafford, obviously, I mean, sure, could they still go for quarterback? Maybe, but I doubt it because I think they'd be buying into Stafford for 2-3 years at least. And then I think they quickly become a trade down candidate because if I was sitting here thinking, okay, if I'm not taking quarterback, who would I pick? There's really good players, but for them specifically, like a really good right tackle would be something that I would look at, and there's just not one that you're taking at 3. There's not a Joe Alt in this class. As much as I like some of the offensive linemen, it's just like Will Campbell's probably going to be a guard. I like him a lot, and I think I think he'd be a good pick because you can start him somewhere on that offensive line. Do I think he's worth 3 in this class? Maybe, but it's a little high for my liking. But all that in saying, it's we don't know what they're going to do in free agency, so I'm not going to just guess that they're going to get a quarterback. I think they'll get somebody, whether it's a Stafford or someone way lower, like I don't think Kirk would go there, but I don't think Darnold would either. So you're looking at what, Jacoby Brissett, someone of that tier of like a bridge guy, Jameis Winston maybe. You're still going to draft a quarterback if you like one. So I'm going to give him Shedeur again. I think we did that last week. But like you said, Shedeur's used to playing shaky offensive line play. The Giants, I do think they've gotten better, but it's still, like I said, not there, not quite there yet. I think he could start day one. I think they have enough weapons on offense. Obviously, they probably need more, but I think he has the brains to match up with Daboll day one and at least get what they got out of Daniel Jones that 1 year, 2 years ago, that he was healthy and competent. Like I think Shedeur could definitely at least get that type of production, and they were a playoff team that year. So you never know.
Yeah, I agree. Generally speaking, again, going back to your quarterback point, I think that there's one free agent quarterback this year that they could actually really target, and that would be Justin Fields, who I think is going to be a target for a good number of teams. I think that obviously I want him to re-sign with my Steelers, but he would be a guy that has the mobility like Josh Allen does. He has that little bit of a bigger frame, so he's not just shifty, but also has the frame to back it up. Obviously not quite as big as Josh Allen. But I think that that's a guy who, again, has experience playing behind a piss-poor offensive line, who could maybe be a guy that you have step in and you work with Daboll and you say, okay, well, Daboll worked with Josh Allen and kind of helped turn him into an NFL-ready quarterback. Where coming out of Wyoming, it did not look like he was going to be that kind of guy. I think personally I would make that same argument with Cam Ward, that maybe, some of the things like the footwork and those different elements of his game that you want somebody to be able to develop. You would want a Brian Daboll type guy being that mentor to him and working through that process with him. Again, to touch on your point, he does not have a Josh Allen arm, so by no means am I saying that is a good comparison for who I think that he could be. And honestly, the same with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields has a fine arm, but his arm is probably comparable to what Cam Ward's is at this point. I don't think that it is a crazy rocket arm that a Joe Milton could have, and certainly if he was on the move this offseason, seeing a little bit out of him in New England last year, he could be another guy that would work out really well for the Giants. I know you don't agree with that statement, but if you have a guy on your coaching staff that you think could develop the accuracy, could develop some of these other traits and all that kind of stuff. I know if you go back and you look at the Wyoming tape, you're not seeing Josh Allen just airmail his receivers all the time. His lower completion percentage has a lot to do more with the receivers not catching balls and things like that. But Man, I don't know. I would be kind of excited if I was a Giants fan and I got Joe Milton. He's one of the few guys that I would be okay with the Steelers adding this offseason. If that's going to be the guy that we are targeting as a quarterback to be the guy, you absolutely need something else.
Yes.
As a more
like
safe
Russell
option. Not Russell Wilson. That would be very low on my list. I would rather sign almost anybody than Russell Wilson.
Ryan Tannehill.
I would love to trade for Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton and just run it back with the Tennessee
Jesus Christ,
2022 offense.
Well, look, I'll say this about Joe Milton while we're talking about him. When he was, I almost said traded, when he went to the Vols that first year and was projected to be the starter over Hendon Hooker, and I watched his tape from Michigan, I thought two things. I was like, holy crap, this dude can't hit a throw. But then I also thought, holy crap, this dude could be the best quarterback to ever play in college football, because he might have the strongest arm that I have ever seen, including Josh Allen, Mahomes, Jamarcus Russell. Like, the way that I've seen him throw live too in I guess summer camp or whatever you want to call it. And you know, he got beat out by Hooker because, dude, he had guys wide open down the field. He was throwing 60-yard bombs and just was overthrowing them by 7 yards still. Like super fast guys. And then, you know, Hooker has his good season, and from what I saw from Milton, is it looked like he was getting more accurate because he was coming in spot duty if we were winning pretty big, and he was actually hitting some throws. So the year that he was going to get to start for us, I was, you know, watching more and more stuff of him in the summer practices, and I might have been, I was all over Joe Milton being like the next big thing, because I felt like he finally cleaned up some of his footwork. He cleaned up some of the timing. He you know, had worked with these wide receivers long enough. He was going to at least get up to like a 65% accuracy kind of a quarterback. I never thought he was going to be 70, 75%. Even in Tennessee's offense, which honestly, they make some easy completions in that offense. They spread the ball out. You have some screens and stuff like that. And the thing is, it's like some games Joe Milton looked like a Josh Allen. But the majority of the games against good teams, he was just missing the easy throws. But it was just by 2 or 3 yards. It was just enough to be so frustrating that we would lose games just because, you know, 3 or 4 throws that were just a few yards off, we could have had 3 or 4 more touchdowns. But he just kept missing those throws. So he frustrated me so much that year that I just can't have him be good, because it just pains me. But I will say, in preseason, and if you want to call that a real game last year at the end of the season,
it was a start.
You can see his tool. It was a start, but like, yeah, but against
who? It wasn't
who?
technically a start, actually, now that I think about it. I think he didn't technically start the game. I think they did for like a couple snaps, but then he
kind of, and it was against like I don't know. It was pretty close.
It was against Buffalo.
They didn't have anything to play for, though, really.
Yeah, who cares? He went 22 of 29, completed 75.9% of his passes.
Against backups.
Season completion percentage.
Well, if people can talk shit about Bo Nix throwing 5 touchdowns or whatever against half of the Chiefs' backups, then I don't know. Anyways, I don't want him to be good, but at the same time, you know, he's a good dude from what I can see. So I'm rooting for him in the closet somewhere. I just don't want you to ever know, because it pains me. But I went off on a tangent. I think he'd be a really good fit for the Giants if they got him cheap enough. But they'd have to have, again, I think they're just on such a time clock. And to go back to what you were just saying about Cam Ward, I think Cam Ward would be an awesome fit with Daboll, truly. Like, if I felt like they had an extra year to play with, I probably would have gone Ward. And maybe that's just silly of me to make that pick just because of that. But I also really don't know which quarterback I like more, and I could see Daboll adjusting his, you know, what he calls plays accordingly. And I just think Sanders is more pro ready. And if they brought in a bridge that they were pretty confident they could get some wins out of for 1 year, then I think they could definitely go Cam Ward. But again, we don't know what they're going to do in free agency, so I'm going to go with the safer route.
Yeah, and I think too, Shedeur is kind of built for that moment. Obviously, his dad was literally nicknamed Primetime for a reason. I don't think he's going to shy away from the lights in New York. I think that he's a guy that you probably trust there. And see, this is the thing that I hate about the situation that the Giants have put themselves in, with their ownership basically publicly coming out and saying, our guys have 1 year left. I'm sick of losing. If they don't get it done, they're out. It puts you in a weird predicament then, because again, if you're trying to attract a free agent, do you want to go somewhere where you don't know if the quarterback or the head coach and the GM are going to be there after a year? As you're drafting people again, if I was Brian Daboll, which obviously I'm not as well-rounded, pun intended, I would want to go sit down with John Mara and say, listen, I believe that the best player for us to draft is not Shedeur Sanders. I believe that the best player for us to draft is not Cam Ward. Joe Milton is a goat. That is a fact. Thank you. I believe that the best player for us to draft is not a quarterback at all. We have a lot of needs on our offensive line. It would be great to build that up. Again, like you talked about, maybe Will Campbell is a little bit too early here. It kind of depends on what his measurements come in as. Maybe he does grade out as an offensive tackle. Maybe he's a guy that you do feel comfortable sticking at offensive tackle, specifically right tackle, and just seeing what he can do. I don't know. That's going to be up to each team individually to make those determinations. Maybe you put him at right tackle and you bump Evan Neal inside, which I think they experimented with some last year, playing him at guard. But if you can buy an extra year for yourself and you say, listen, we may very well have a very high pick again next year, but we would be much better off not burning our pick on the quarterback this year to try to get 6 wins and picking still in the top 10 but not in the top 5. We'd be better building up this roster and seeing what we can do with it in a year, 2 years. I'm not asking for an extension right now. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just trying to beg for my life here and say, please, give me some time. I don't want to put the franchise in a situation where 2-3 years from now, you're going to be dealing with problems because we took a guy that we felt we needed to take because we were coaching for our positions. This has happened time and time again, by the way. You can see back multiple instances in NFL history where a coach and GM have gotten fired the year after they take a guy, and what that does to a team. It happened with the Cardinals and Josh Rosen going into Kyler Murray. Was Josh Rosen the right guy for the job? I don't think so, but they felt the need to take him because they knew that they were coaching for the jobs, and there's plenty of other examples I could give you of this happening. Same thing kind of happened with Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson. But again, is that what you want to put on your team? Is that what you want to have happen? Is that what you want to be the impetus behind what the season means to your coach, what your team? Because at the end of the day, most of the players that are on the Giants are going to want to play for their guy. If Brian Daboll is their guy, they're going to want to play for him. We've seen this happen with Antonio Pierce, yada yada, so on and so forth. And the Raiders are still picking at 6. And Pierce got fired in the offseason. But if they can have those conversations, if Shane and Daboll can have those conversations with John Mara and say, listen, I get it. You're frustrated with losing. I don't like it either. I'm coming from the Bills. We won a good amount of games with Josh Allen at quarterback. There's no Josh Allen in this draft class. Give me some time. Let's make a move. Maybe they are a team, like I said, that gets a Justin Fields that hasn't really fully developed his game yet. Maybe they get a Joe Milton. Maybe they do draft a quarterback here. I don't know what that conversation looks like and how that conversation goes between Daboll and ownership. I would imagine that some sort of conversation has to happen because I wouldn't feel comfortable. Again, Shedeur Sanders, for having the floor that he has, and some of the great talents, and he has a fairly decent ceiling. I'm not saying that Shedeur Sanders is going to be a career backup quarterback, but I'm also saying
he could easily be a Jared Goff.
He could easily be a Jared Goff, and Jared Goff threw for 5,000 yards this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that, and I mean Jared Goff went 1 overall.
Yeah,
so.
Jared Goff went number 1 overall in a different class that looks retroactively kind of similar.
But he could also be a Teddy Bridgewater.
Mobility and yada yada. Carson Wentz has some injury concerns, some mobility, blah blah blah. There's some comparisons in that draft class.
Yeah.
And the best quarterback would be drafted in the 3rd round that year, Dak Prescott and
Russie
Jackson Dart. Both from Mississippi too. But anyway, I think that if the Giants can have those conversations and they have them up front and they're able to work through it, they don't need to take a quarterback here, and that would be great. But again, what we're doing right now is trying to predict what the situations might ebb and flow as. Again, I know that I personally made a draft selection for the Browns at 2 that was an edge rusher, which they don't need right now because they have Myles Garrett, but I'm predicting that Myles Garrett's going to be...
I'd argue they still need one. So I think that's
fair.
Is
I think
they need 2.
And they could certainly use an extra one. I think Za'Darius Smith is a free agent again. If they brought him back, that'd be kind of funny. But
yeah, I think they needed it.
The Giants are certainly not locked into taking a quarterback at 3. But as it currently stands today, with free agency not having happened, no trades having happened, like you said, yes, I think that there's an obvious link there with Stafford and his, what is it now, brother-in-law is the quarterback's coach, something like that.
Yeah.
And there's an obvious connection there.
If that happened, I think Mason Graham would be probably... It would be between Graham and Will Campbell, who they would go with here.
Probably.
If they didn't need a quarterback.
And
but
honestly, I would probably say that they could even consider trading back a little bit here, too.
Oh, for sure.
There's a team that's going to want that first quarterback, and they, again, looking at the
Raiders, Saints.
Saying, okay, well, you have Stafford, but maybe you want to move on from Stafford after a couple seasons.
Trade down and get Tyler Warren.
Trade down and get Tyler Warren. You trade down, you can get a different defensive back, whatever. But as things stand today, and being as predictive as possible, we're not trying to really speculate on what free agency is going to look like. To me, Myles Garrett is a foregone conclusion. I don't think that Matt Stafford or any of the free agents is a foregone conclusion. And even if I did, does Justin Fields on a 1 to 2 year deal prevent you from taking a quarterback at 3? I don't think so. You would have to have a significant amount of faith in him as a quarterback, which, I could see an argument for. I like him a lot, but I don't think that you have that level of faith in a guy that hasn't put together a full, complete season yet where he has looked like the guy. There's a decent chance that Justin Fields shows up and looks fairly similar to what Daniel Jones has done, and I don't think that Giants fans would love that. Obviously, I think you get him cheaper than the contract that you gave Daniel Jones, which was one of the worst contracts handed out in NFL history, in my humble opinion.
Well, shout out Russell Wilson. But...
Shout out Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, true. Even worse.
But I think that quarterback contracts in general wind up looking like some of the worst contracts because of the pivotal role that they have on the team. And specifically the Daniel Jones deal I'm going to refer to because you basically lost out on Saquon Barkley because of that.
It was like the perfect situation for Daniel Jones and the situation for the Giants because he just took you to the playoff and won a playoff game in his basically contract year. Like, I understand how that's a tough, like, okay, if you don't sign him and you don't have any other plans, like, I mean, sure, that's your job. Maybe don't sign him and find another route. Obviously, that is what you should have done looking back at it now. But I do get how it's a tough
100%.
Spot to be in.
Honestly, it's 2020 on any of these deals. And at the time that these deals are signed, again, it makes sense. Russell Wilson, this deal that he signed with the Broncos made a ton of sense. The deal
it did. I was not mad at all.
Yeah, maybe doesn't make
that
sense.
One was always not great in my opinion. That's because I would not give anybody a fully game.
No, I agree. But it worked out for Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. That deal was fully guaranteed, I think. The difference is Kirk Cousins obviously wasn't coming off of being out of the league for 2 years because, he
Right.
got a little frisky on the massage tables. Shout out Justin Tucker. But I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, the Browns signing Deshaun Watson to the deal that they did, making the trade that they did for him, and then also signing to that deal, is one of the worst combined decisions by a front office in NFL history, which again leads me to my statement earlier that the Browns are the worst organization in all of professional sports. But
Yep.
the Broncos signing Russell Wilson to the deal obviously did not work out. You obviously don't like the deal now. Looking back at it, you're eating all this dead money for a guy who never meshed well with Sean Payton, which again, for how many years did I say Sean Payton would do wonders with Russell Wilson because he likes his short boy quarterbacks who can, make those sorts of reads, and there's a lot of Drew Brees' game to what Russell Wilson does. And then, you get him there, and you roll him out, and he is awful. And
Well, I think you really just find out that
Russell Wilson had a lot more
he was being helped with
Chris
the run
Sims in him
game.
than Phil Sims.
Yeah, pretty much. He was being helped with the run game, the defense. Having two awesome deep threats at all. I mean, Golden Tate, awesome deep threat, awesome, down the field and really in the middle of the field. DK obviously is awesome down the field. Tyler Lockett obviously awesome down the field. Curse, had some awesome plays down the field. There's someone else I'm forgetting too, but still. Baldwin, thank you. Yeah, awesome down the field. And that's what Russ is good at. Those down the field throws. He had some good comeback wins. He has those plays, but if you really look at it, and I oversaw this too, because I was familiar with Sean Payton, obviously from afar, but he really wants somebody that is going to run his offense this way. He's scheming these plays up on purpose to get these guys open in certain ways on purpose. But when your quarterback hikes the ball and then does whatever the frick he wants to do instead of running that play, like he will run the play, but then he won't throw it to the first or second read. Like he'll try to make his own stuff happen. He plays that hero ball too much. And
Russell Wilson winning a Super Bowl early in his career is the worst thing that could have happened to Russell Wilson, which I know is a wild statement to make.
It made him think he was
that's a death knell to anybody else, but I think that it inflated his ego so much by thinking that I'm a quarterback that can make the plays that I need to make and yada yada, so on and so forth. Which, by the way, let's be quite honest with that. And again, I do not mean to fucking dump on your grave here because I know that this is a touchy subject for you. The Seahawks defense won that game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why. Malcolm. What's his last name? Malcolm Rodriguez. Malcolm Smith, that's right. Malcolm Smith was the MVP of that Super Bowl. And it had nothing to do with Russell Wilson. I'll tell you that much for sure. But he got such a big ego out of this. And again, you saw this on his exit out of Seattle, that it was the coach's fault and everything was terrible. And Russell Wilson's a perfect little angel. And then you see him get to Denver, and he's, like you said, running his own plays. And yes, he's running the plays that Sean Payton's calling, but then he's making his own reads, and he's just predetermining where the ball's going to go. Because I saw that a lot in Denver. Of him,
he doesn't want to take what's open because he wants to make the big play. But then when we're 3rd and 13, he'll just dump it off. And then,
but also, I'm saying he would be seeing
taking
a
the
matchup that
sacks.
he decided that he liked, and not care about a too high safety look where they then help with whatever. And
he doesn't adjust on
this
fly.
one read. That he just eats a sack for 10 yards because he's like, I'm getting the ball to Courtland Sutton here no matter what. I'm getting the ball to Jerry Jeudy here no matter what. And
so if he goes up against a defense that's disguising something, he's just fucked.
And frankly speaking, not even disguising anything. Because how bad is Miami's defense? And they got blown out by Miami. So then you see him come to the Steelers, and you say, okay, well, he's going to be good here because the Steelers' defense is a lot reminiscent of what the Seahawks' defense was, and he's going to have the ability to work well in that play-action-heavy scheme that Arthur Smith likes to run. And then, at the end of the season, you find out that he did the same thing that he did in Denver in Pittsburgh. And he said, Arthur Smith, I respect your play calls. I don't like them, so I'm just going to audible out at the line of scrimmage the whole time. I'm going to make my own reads. I'm going to make myself the biggest performer on the football field. And the biggest game that I could point to where I saw this happen was the Baltimore game where he fumbled on the 2-yard line or 1-yard line or whatever it was, and just ate a hit stick for no reason with no backup quarterback, because your backup quarterback, Justin Fields, got hurt the week before. And it was just him trying to play hero ball the entire game, and that doesn't work because he's bad at this point of his career. And if a team wants to sign him, more power to you. I really hope it's not my Steelers. If it is my Steelers, you might never see me stream or post a video.
Raiders!
I would love it to be the Raiders. I hope that he and Pete Carroll have mended all of the bridges in the world, and none of them are possibly burned down. He and Najee Harris are going to have a hell of a time out in Las Vegas. But
And DK Metcalf.
Suffice to say, I don't think the Giants need to put themselves in a position where they are so heavily pushing for a quarterback this year that they handicap themselves for years to come. And I really hope that John Mara can see it that way, because this is exactly what they did with Daniel Jones. And it cost them the talent of Saquon Barkley, who just carried his team to a Super Bowl against the most rigged, favorable matchup of all time in the Chiefs. So, again, if we're talking about this, Mason Graham, do you know what kind of impact Mason Graham would have on that defense? Do you know what kind of impact Will Campbell would have on that offensive line? Do you know what kind of impact, frankly, if they traded down a couple picks, Ashton Jeanty would have on that offense?
Could you imagine them doing that?
Could you imagine? But, actually, let's talk about this. Okay, let's talk about a real scenario here, where the Giants wind up not getting anybody really that solid in free agency. They get a Jameis Winston, they get a whoever. And they say, you know what? What worked for us a couple of years ago, what brought us to the playoffs, was not our quarterback play. It was how dominant we had of a running back, a generational type player at running back. And they, again, frankly speaking, I know this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people. If they took Jeanty at 3, I would not be that mad at it. Now, your running back, your previous decision to take a quarterback at 2, or a running back at 2 in Saquon Barkley, which you can say had middling levels of success given the lack of offensive line. The Giants' offensive line today is better than the offensive line when they drafted Saquon Barkley at 2, in my opinion.
I agree.
But there's a real world that something like that could happen. And I don't think that's completely out of line. And personally speaking, that would kind of be awesome. Even if they just stuck with Drew Lock. If they bring Drew Lock back and they just say, well, let's figure out what happens here. Number one, is Drew Lock's best running back of his entire career. High school, college. NFL.
Whoa. Don't besmirch my Phillip Lindsay like that.
Undrafted running back against the number 3 overall pick in the draft is a hell of a statement. But, just having the ability to have a guy like that is a safety valve for you that you can check down to, because, again, we've talked about this before. One of Ashton Jeanty's greatest qualities is his receiving ability, which he hasn't really displayed at Boise State because he hasn't had to.
Correct.
And having that sort of a workhorse bell cow running back, I know they don't list running back as one of their top needs because they had Tyrone Tracy last year. Tyrone Tracy does not prevent you from drafting a running back in the first 2 or 3 rounds of this draft class. Personally, if the Giants head coach and general manager can have that conversation about, we need to make moves that are the best for the future of this team. I've been rambling about this for, I think, 30 minutes now, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick here.
No.
The Patriots are a weird team. In terms of what they do with their first-round picks, they don't normally pick this high, which is unusual for them. I know they did last year with May, and they're going to again this year, unless they make a trade of some sort. But, man, Will Campbell feels like one of those Patriots-types guys, where it's that little kind of in-between tackle and offensive guard. Again, he's 6'6", he's 323. Where does he exactly fit on their offensive line? I'm not entirely sure. Part of it is, I think, going to depend on what his testing looks like, his measurements and all that at the combine. And he could very well wind up slipping just because he doesn't have a defined role. That's certainly happened before with guys, but I like him enough, and again, he feels like a Patriots type of selection that I think that's just going to be what I pick here. there's a handful of honorable mentions. I think Tat McMillan sitting here is a guy that we could certainly be talking about at number 4. I think I feel more comfortable going Will Campbell. And again, Drake May you took last year. We're having those same conversations that we did with in New York and saying you want to build up that offensive line. You want to keep your guy from getting killed. They could use guard. They could use tackle. So they could very well address both of those things in free agency, but with them not having done that, I'm just going to take Will Campbell and say it might be a little bit early, but that's the Patriot way, baby.
I almost did it last week. I think he's the perfect Mike Vrabel player and Patriot player. Just tough. Like he's an offensive lineman that Mike Vrabel's probably going to fall in love with. So, yeah, no argument
Vrabel
for me.
Was there when they took Skronsky, no?
Yes, he was.
And obviously that was a later pick, but not that.
Yeah, but still, I mean, similar play styles, and I mean, you can even make. You could even say that Will Campbell was a little better at processing at this point than Skoronski was. I think Will Campbell's football IQ is higher than people give him credit for. All right, this pick's super easy for me. I'm just going to give him Mason Graham. They need a defensive line horribly bad. I think I'd put it at their number 1. Well, close to interior offensive lineman, but it's that. I mean, those 3 needs that they're showing are probably pretty right in my opinion of what the biggest 3 things that they need. But man, they need a difference maker on that defensive line. They just got gashed in the run game last year. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I know last week I had said something about, man, if Mason Graham fell to them, I don't think they'd think twice about picking him. The only way that they wouldn't, I think, is if they're like, we really like this defensive line class. There's a couple guys that we really like that I think that'll be there in the second round. Darius Alexander, Harmon, which I he could end up being a first rounder. But yeah, I mean, yes.
So could Darius Alexander.
True. But like those type of guys, and then they're like, you know what? Let's take a corner here. Let's take maybe they super early, but like Barron, if they just love the dude, if they like him more than Will Johnson, I would pick Will Johnson before. But or if they just want to do something crazy and like let's add another wide receiver, like they could go a few different routes. But I think Mason Graham, if he's there, is just a home run pick. He's a top 5 player for me in the class. So
yeah, and I agree with that as well. I think that you're looking at a situation where with the players that are left on the board, you got to make a selection that you feel good about, and
he's one of the not last, but he's one of those blue chip players that you feel comfortable with his floor and also has a high ceiling.
Yep. There's a reason why he's created at a 90 plus for PFF, which again, I hate PFF grading system. I think that it's one of the worst things to ever grace football, and I wish that they would cease to exist as an organization. But with that being said, it plays. He's a national championship winning defensive lineman. He's a good player, and positional value aside, I think that he's a top 5 player in the draft class, and factoring positional value in with defensive lineman being something that is at least relatively important. We've seen defensive linemen go as a number 1 overall pick a handful of times in the last 10, 15 years. It's not out of any realm of possibility. It's not out of lunacy that he would be selected at 5. It would be a great pick for him. In the sake of keeping things rolling here, I think that there's no world that the Raiders don't address quarterback in free agency. With that said, if they don't, taking Cam Ward here, it makes a lot of sense. You look at Pete Carroll's offensive schemes, and I think they play well to Cam Ward's strengths. There's going to be some things that he has to work on, for sure. But the Raiders are probably the team, I think, looking at the top 10, I think that they are the most volatile team in terms of what happens in free agency as to
Yeah.
what I would do with their first round pick.
They're also just a volatile team, anyways, of the Raiders.
Well, that is true. But I think that quarterback, running back, wide receiver, cornerback are all positions that they could address in free agency. And then at that point, do they really become their biggest needs? I don't know. They could attract a Russell Wilson. They could attract a Sam Darnold. They could attract a whatever. And do those guys prevent you from taking a quarterback here? Maybe not. But personally, I think that if you're signing one of those two guys, you're probably not taking a quarterback round one. They could attract a Najee Harris, an Aaron Jones, a insert running back here. And if they do that, does that prevent you from taking Ashton Jeanty? Not necessarily, but there's a lot of good running backs in this class, and you probably don't need to take one at 6 if you're going to add one later on. Wide receiver, personally, I think there's less likelihood that they add a wide receiver in free agency this year, just with the other teams that are going to be looking at wide receiver. It would be kind of cool if Amari Cooper came back home. That would be a little fun story. But is Amari Cooper going to sign somewhere that doesn't have a quarterback? Probably not. So a lot of things are going to depend on what they decide to do in free agency. But as it stands right now, I think we gave him Cam Ward last week, and I just want to switch it up a little bit and go a different direction. And a guy that
I don't think we did.
What?
Nope, because didn't I give Cleveland Cam Ward?
Maybe. I wish I could tell
Not
you.
to mess up your train of thought.
Pod. So welcome to YouTube, everybody.
Not to mess up your train of thought. I'm pretty sure it was Carter, Cam, Shador, and then Travis Hunter was there at 4, and I did the silly thing and gave the Patriots Mason Graham, and then the Jags, I think, got Travis Hunter. I think that was the top.
The Raiders then?
That was my pick. Who did I give the Raiders?
Because I really don't remember.
I didn't give him Jeanty, did I?
I don't think so, because Jeanty we gave to the Bears at 10, and we said
maybe I gave him Tet.
That we could...
Maybe I gave him Tet.
Well, that's what I'm doing again. If that's what we did last week, that's what I'm doing again. If that's not what we did last week, that's what I'm doing again.
It's fine. Either way. I like it.
I remember specifically talking last week about how the Raiders... You talked specifically about how the Raiders didn't necessarily need a wide receiver because Jacoby Myers is better than people think.
I did.
And they have Brock Bowers and et cetera, et cetera. Now, you do this a lot where you talk about how a team doesn't necessarily need something and then you still take that guy anyway. So it's very possible that you took Tet McMillan for him last week. And again,
yes,
my apologies if that is what happened and I'm misremembering the situation. But I'm going to do that again. I like Jacoby Myers as much as the next guy. I think Jacoby Myers slots a lot better in as a wide receiver 2 than as a wide receiver 1 for a team. And yes, you can make the argument that you say, okay, well, Brock Bowers is basically wide receiver 1 for the Raiders, and that Jacoby Myers is a wide receiver 2. You're not wrong, but when you have a guy that's 6'5" that I think is probably going to run somewhere in the high 4.4s, low 4.5s, which maybe I'm wrong, we'll find out pretty soon. But I think that he has a lot of capabilities. And, you know, as long as he decides to not drive, 120 some odd miles an hour on the strip drunk as hell, he could be a pretty good fit for a team that has been looking for a fast and explosive wide receiver since, 2020 draft, give or take. It would have been awesome if they would have addressed that with the first-round pick a couple of years ago. I think that they would probably be in a lot better of a situation now than they are. But, obviously they chose not to do that. There's nobody that I could possibly be forgetting about here that they neglected to take. So, Tet McMillan, I think, is going to be that guy for me. Obviously, it's unfortunate that he doesn't have any real character concerns to this point of his career going to the Raiders, but...
he's got time.
Yeah, plenty of time. Maybe he steals some crab legs before opening day. The draft hasn't happened yet. Maybe he decides that he's going to smoke a bong out of a fishbowl. I don't know. We'll see what he decides to do this year. But, I think that fit is just too good from a player perspective. Even if some of the extracurriculars don't necessarily line up with the way that the Raiders typically like to draft.
Yeah, I think all that checks out. I won't add too much. I mean, I don't remember who we get this week, so which is crazy that I can't remember who I picked for them. But anyways, move on to the Jets. You put me in a weird spot because I knew exactly what I was going to do. Now I'm thinking, would they? Right now, what they're going to sign Tyrod Taylor, who I'm a Tyrod Taylor fan, but if Cam Ward's here at 7, I don't know why they wouldn't at least think about taking him if he's here. I was going to make a spicy pick a little bit.
Was it really spicy, or was it a guy that we both know is going to go in the top 10?
Well, my first thought was someone that should be going in the top 10. My next thought was spicy. Not someone that usually goes in the top 10, but someone I could see the Jets loving, and someone that I think you can make the argument. I think there was an article that we shared through text messages this week saying that picks 10 through 34 or something like that. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah, maybe. I don't remember who it was. Yeah, they're all relatively the same value of player, which
the Yates. I don't remember.
But yeah, still, obviously we're not at 10, we're at 7. But I think there's going to be at least 2 picks in this top 10, maybe even 3. There were people who are like, wow, I didn't think that guy was going to go top 10. One of those guys being, you're on Shamar Stewart. I think the way that he's going to test and is testing already, I think he probably will be one of those guys. I also think Kenneth Grant is going to, I don't know why, man. I'm watching Kenneth Grant's tape. I see the Jets because they need defensive line. I know that'd be wild, 2 Michigan defensive linemen going top 10, but he is very much so a great compliment to Quinnen Williams, and they don't have anybody with Quinnen, so that was the spicy pick I was going to go, and that's the earliest I think I've seen Kenneth Grant, but I think he's going to be one of those players that shoots up. I think NFL teams are going to like him more than what some of the media. But he's been mocked mid-first, so it's not crazy jump for him. But still, I don't think I've seen him go top 10 yet. You're looking at Shamar Stewart, yeah, dude, 5'4'9", unofficial. It's fast. He came in lighter, so he wasn't as heavy. He was definitely going to go for get a freaky 40 performance. So
this is absurd, right? Having this conversation that a edge rusher from 1987 to 2025 is 3rd all time in athletic ability of 1,802 defensive ends. I would love to know who is above him personally. I don't know who they are, but a 9.99 is above. Why am I drawing a blank? Georgia, Tavon Walker. I think he was a 9.5.
Yeah.
Which is crazy athletic.
Yeah. Well, so,
and you watch profile when you watch Tavon Walker play. He had a more complete.
It's profile. Just the production of Shamar that people. It's warranted, but you can see how he gets off blocks, his burst and how he plays. It's going to be a scheme-dependent thing. NFL teams are going to use him in different ways. They're going to teach him better techniques, things that I think are so teachable that I think he's probably going to go top 10 as well. I think the Jets would be a good fit. I think that they need more of an inside get, which Shamar could play that inside, but I really think he's going to play the best with how athletic he is, playing over the tackle. Mm-hmm. I feel like the Jets would be a good fit, but I think that they would be looking for someone a little more on the ends, like a 3 technique almost, instead of that outside guy. And Stewart has the body type to do both, but I think I might give the Jets Cam Ward. They have no answer at quarterback right now, nothing. And The only thing that's stopping me is their new GM, Moogie, is, obviously he's been with the Broncos for a long time, and I think he's going to. When the Broncos passed on Justin Fields to take Patrick Surtain, and everybody was freaking out. Like, how could they not take it? And I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to. I loved Patrick Surtain, so I was fine with the pick. I was happy. But
you mean Josh Allen, right? Not Justin Fields.
Nope, they passed on Justin Fields to get PS2. They passed on Josh Allen to get Bradley Chubb.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But no, J.C. Horn went, which I was surprised that he went over Surtain, and then Justin Fields was still on the board, and everybody was talking about him going earlier. But then there's some rumors he was going to drop and all that. But when he got to the Broncos pick, I mean, everybody, like, if you're watching NFL Network, ESPN, like, all the live things, like, oh well, the Broncos are taking Justin Fields. I can't believe he dropped to them. They're not going to take Mac Jones over him. Like, they're definitely going to take Justin Fields. And they take neither. They take the best player available. They weren't sold on either one of the quarterbacks. Apparently, they liked Justin Fields, but they had PS2 as their first or like a top 2 player in the entire draft, which obviously they look right. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to complain about it, but I remember them saying he was literally, if they picked 1 overall, like he was up there, he would have been in consideration for the first pick. So they couldn't pass on him. And I think if PS2 wasn't there, they might have taken Fields. But in saying all that, like, that does give me some hesitation. Like, do the Jets take Will Johnson here? It was just like the easy pick. They need a DB to replace DJ Reed. He is PS2-like in terms of how technically sound he is. So I think those are the two that I'm between. As much as I'd like to go Shamar, I think I have another team who they'll go to here soonish if we don't take him here. So I don't know that I've seen this too many times, but the way that I think the Jets are going to want to run their offense, I think they're going to want some big playability just because I think they're, you look at Aaron Glenn, okay, he's going to want to run a good solid defense. And normally when you have guys like that, it's like, all right, control the clock, control the game, run the ball. And I think he's going to want to be physical. He's going to want to be a physical football team, and he's going to want to run the ball and control the clock. But he comes from an aggressive background, and these player coaches that you're seeing, the players that are now head coaches, tend to be more aggressive and want to get the ball down the field. They don't want to play just super safe all the time. Even Mike Vrabel, who they played a safer brand of football, but like he wants to play aggressive. Like you see the way that he's coaching, they just couldn't play aggressively on offense because they didn't have that quarterback to do so.
But even Cam Ward went for it on 4th down a good amount.
Yes,
aggressively in terms of their decision making, but they weren't able to take the big shots down the field, which I think is what you're talking about. Correct.
Yes. And if they run a system similar to I don't know what kind of offense they're going to run, truthfully, because the guy that they signed, Engelstring? I always forget this dude's name.
Tanner Engelstad, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean he comes from yeah. Like, is he going to run the same type of offense that they ran in Detroit? Like, it's probably going to have some similarities, but they run such a multiple offense. Like, it's not just let's pound the rock. Let's just throw the ball. Like, they were very creative, and I think having a guy like Cam Ward in there, like, the Jets are going to want to have an answer. The Jets fans are going to go ballistic if they walk into next season with Tyrod Taylor. Like, it's just not going to happen. And there's not many free agents that I see going there. Not sure, like, maybe they trade for Hendon Hooker. Maybe, Matt Stafford's not going to go there. Sam Darnold's definitely not going to go there. There's just not a lot of options. Like, I've heard Fields is an option there, and I would like that.
It's crazy. I've heard Fields is an option for every single team that needs a quarterback. Yeah,
he's
a good quarterback that a team that had him last year that has the ability to resign he has open free agency should probably make a move to do so. Crazy.
Yeah. In saying all that, I'm gonna get Cam Ward.
Perfect.
I think they just need a quarterback.
Cam Ward for him, and I would be very screwed if I had to
Oh,
go back
cool.
and redo it. So.
No, well, sweet. On to Carolina.
On to Cincinnati. Yeah. Will Johnson here would be a good fit.
They can go a lot of ways, yeah.
Like you were talking about, they took J.C. Horn a couple years ago. That obviously didn't really pan out for him. But they also traded a pretty key player to the Giants not that long ago. And despite some attempts, I don't think that they've really replaced him all that particularly well.
Nope.
Which, again, I think we talked about last week. I think you might have taken Mike Green for him here. But I'm going to go with a guy who is not being hampered by an ability at the combine and has instead exploded. I think he's going to shoot up draft boards. And, again, this is the kind of twitchy player that Carolina likes to have. Evero having that background with... I keep hitting defensive line. Evero having the background with the Broncos defense. And obviously you have a Pat Surtain there. So I can make a very good argument for Will Johnson and saying, okay, give Evero his Pat Surtain. But the Broncos also had a pretty solid pass rush for most of the time that Pat Surtain was there.
We've had a good rotation, yeah.
And obviously I think that this past season was the best that the Broncos pass rush have looked. That's not a crazy thing to say, given that they, I think, set their team record for most sacks in a season this past year.
Oh yeah, we set records like all-time sack record. I think not even for the team. Like
was it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think it was like the all-time most sacks or something like that. You can fact check me if you'd like, but I'm pretty certain.
The Chicago Bears, you fraud.
Nope.
The Broncos are not in the top.
Nope, we are number 1.
14. You are
number
a
1.
liar and a fraud, and should be publicly executed.
Nope. Yeah, they're definitely number 1.
Anyway, moving on from my online threats. Don't ban me, YouTube. I'm going to take Shamar Stewart here. Again, we're talking about a guy that I think is going to shoot up draft boards wildly with his athleticism. And I think that any of the next, call it 8 teams, could take him here. Again, I think there's an argument for the Jets taking him. I agree with you. I don't think that he's the biggest need for the Jets, so they should probably take a guy who's going to be lining up more inside, but they have Jermaine Johnson, who they took last year, who's a very similar player, I think, to Shamar Stewart in a good amount of ways. That they could get a little creative with it. They lost out on Huff and John Franklin Myers last year. Obviously, Hassan Reddick is there this year. But until he decides to desert the team to go back to Japan again, I don't know that he's going to be there for the training camp this summer. You might just want to build in a contingency plan with Shamar Stewart. But I think you could argue that Saints don't really need him. Cam Jordan's not getting any younger. And as they run into more and more cap concerns, it becomes more and more of a need. The Bears could use an edge rusher. The
Niners could
a pass rusher until they sign Joey Bosa this year.
Correct.
The Cowboys need another edge rusher.
Yep.
The Dolphins don't necessarily need one, but also they wouldn't be hurting if they took one. And obviously, I think Shamar Stewart's floor at this point, getting drafted, is the Colts or the Falcons. Number 1, the Colts love their combine darlings in the first round. And Shamar Stewart is too athletic, I think, for them to pass up one, period, point blank. I think it would take a very serious fall for one of these guys. Again, maybe Tyler Warren, they would take over him, but I think with how well he tested, they could pass on Tyler Warren for Shamar Stewart if they were picking between the two. But if so, I think that the Falcons would be thrilled to add a guy like that to their rotation and just have a guy like that they believe can be explosive. The Falcons are all in on guys that haven't proven anything in college that have athleticism. So I think that he could definitely, flame out in a couple of years. Shout out Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley. But he would be a guy that I think that if he doesn't go before 15, I don't think he makes it past 15.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. He won't make it past this. That would be, in my opinion, I mean, your floor is probably right, but, like, max floor, the Seahawks would take it. Like, there's no way in, like, that team, that's, like, their type of player.
Mm-hmm.
So, if he somehow made it to 18, I would be shocked, first of all. But if he did, I'd be even more shocked if he made it past them.
Right.
But yeah. Freaky player. Panthers obviously had like one of the worst defensive performances last year and really the year before. Not good at all.
Yeah.
And that's just a guy you could build around for sure. So, what they had Clowney, no?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good Clowney replacement right there. So there you go.
Significantly better Clowney.
Oh, from what Clowney was in college, hard to say that, but in the NFL, correct.
Clowney was aged.
Correct.
How old is he now?
He's probably 30, right? I don't know. That's just a guess. I gotta look now.
32-year-old Jadeveon Clowney last year. Sorry, I guess 31-year-old because he just turned 32 on Valentine's Day.
That was close.
I'll take Shamar Stewart at 22.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's a good.
Oh, I know what you're saying, but I'm just.
Yeah. 9. I think the more that I do mock drafts and just see this fit, I just think they're gonna take Tyler Warren if he's there. I don't see a lot of people making that pick, but I mean, you touched on this. Like the Saints' cap space is so bad that they're gonna have to eventually just start getting rid of players and resetting. Like eventually they will have to do this. Well, they're gonna do it right now, no, but there's not a receiver here that I mean, there's receivers I like, but I don't think there's one that's going to go at 9. Defensive line and edge, they also need. I think they could use another tackle. They could use another interior guy as well on the offensive line. So, like, if Will Campbell fell here, I mean, that's an easy. I think that's what we did last week. I think.
Home in LSU.
Correct. And I know I just touched on Kenneth Grant. Like, I think he's gonna rise up to like around this spot, and like it wouldn't shock me if he went 7, 8, 9, like around those picks. But I could also see him going 20, 21, 22. Like that whole stretch right there. It's going to be really fascinating to see where some of these guys go, because I think a lot of them are probably graded similarly in like a vast overview of players in their respective like ranks, but then team by team basis, certain teams are just gonna rank guys differently based on needs and like traits that they like. So it's kind of hard to tell. Like Kenneth Grant is definitely a guy that I think the Saints would like size wise and the way that he plays. So that was like my next choice for guys here. I'm not as high on Luther Burden as some people, so I wouldn't put him here. I don't think he's going top 10. He might not even. He's like late 20s pick for me. Yeah, I'm going to give him Tyler Warren. They're going to lose probably both of their tight ends this year in free agency, and they have nobody. So Tyler Warren is just, I wouldn't say he's a unicorn, but he's just one of those players that he's just going to be a damn good football player. He has some stuff he needs to work on, I think, to like round out his game, but you get the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays. They need some more offensive playmakers because Kamara's not getting younger. Sure, you can make the argument, well, they take Janty. I think there's too many good backs. They still have Kamara. They could take someone later, and wide receiver wise, Olave's had 45 concussions since he's been in the league. Shaheed is kind of just a deep guy. He also was hurt more than half of last year. As much as I like Bub means business, like I mean, he's just a depth guy, really. and I can't even think of who their other guy is that I'm drawing a blank on. But they don't have a lot of weapons. They hardly have any really. So just get the best weapon on the board, in my opinion. And yeah, that's pretty easily Tyler.
Yeah. Before you said it, I already had clicked on his profile, which I'm sure that you couldn't see if you were on the stream. Or maybe you could. I think it was slightly before with the delay, but
I wasn't looking. I was too busy staring at my draft board.
Well, that's because we have telekinesis or telepathy or whatever you call it. Yeah, I mean, I've seen now at least 3 comps of Tyler Warren to Jeremy Shockey. So
makes sense.
You know, it just is fitting that he would wind up in New Orleans.
Yep.
I know that they have gone through a whole bunch of changes to their coaching staffs and all that kind of stuff, but the one thing that hasn't changed is their general manager, which is the one thing that needed a change, and it hasn't. So again, rest in peace to my Penn State boys here. You're going to die. You're going to hell. You are not going to experience happiness for at least 4 years. Godspeed to you. I hope you see the light as it comes through in the near future. But you're not going to experience happiness or joy for a little bit here as you go through purgatory with 2 of the worst organizations in the football league.
Kellen Moore season, baby. Kellen Moore's going to get some out of Tyler Warren.
We'll go with that. Something like that. The Bears need a lot of things. We gave them Genty last week, I'm pretty sure. And I stand by that decision. I don't think that there is anything that prevents me from taking him to the Bears. Other than that, I think the Bears may try to address running back in free agency this year and saying that Swift can be a 1A to a different player's 1B, looking for somebody that has a little more of a punch. Maybe they add a Najee Harris. Maybe they add a Javonte Williams. Again, neither of those players should stop you from drafting Ashton Genty, but we will see what the Bears decide to do with a decent amount of cap space, I think, this year, and the ability to address those positions. I think that they might go edge here, and that's obviously not a bold prediction by any means, but
I know who I like.
Well, there's a couple guys that I like here, and Mike Green certainly is one of those guys, but again, I'm going to feed into the hype right now and say the combine means more than it does to some of these teams, and one of those teams might be the Bears this year. And James Pierce Jr. ran a 4.48, 4.49, I think, today.
Yep.
Which is
my boy.
Kind of ridiculous. He's obviously graded out pretty well, and just having the size that he has, the abilities that he has. You know, maybe you bring back Khalil Mack in free agency this year, you know, when he gets cut. That would be something. And maybe you could say that Mike Green looks more like a Khalil Mack type player. Slightly smaller school, that kind of stuff. But James Pierce Jr. just looks like a freak, man. And he might drop a little bit to some character concerns. He might drop a little bit to just some other things. And you can make an argument that Mike Green should be above him.
You can also make an argument that the character stuff is smoke and mirrors. I mean, I don't know one way or another. Obviously, I'm a Tennessee fan, and I've loved watching him play, but I know nothing about his character. Nothing ever came out during, like, when he was in college that I know of, so it could be smoke and mirrors. But, if he does have some character stuff, he's probably going to drop a little bit, but dude he might have the fastest first step in the draft off the edge. I'm pretty, which makes sense. Obviously, he just ran that fast in the 40s. His split time was probably crazy too. So, I have Mike Green like a little bit ahead of Pierce in my new big board, but it's mostly just because.
Sorry, he ran a 4.47 at the combine, not a 4.48.
I knew it was under 4.5.
His 10-yard split was a 1.56.
Mike Green, just watching it's silly, but man, watching what he did against such good offensive linemen at the Senior Bowl, and also the production that he had this year. I mean, dude had 17 sacks, and I know it was at Marshall, but like, man, like it's just wild. So, but in saying that, I mean, James Pierce was seen as top 3 pick before this season. Like, he was arguably where Abdul Carter is now. Like he was in that realm. So I could easily see him going before Mike Green.
Yeah.
He went against higher competition for 3 years. So
I think Abdul Carter and James Pierce are both being talked about as these Will Anderson type players going into the season. And it's not that James Pierce had a bad season by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think he did.
No,
it's just
he had 43 hurries.
Right, with the draft, players that don't have insanely good seasons sometimes slip a little bit further than I think that they should. He had a perfectly serviceable season. Again, 43 hurries, if I had to guess off the top of my head, is more than the Bears had by any player.
Oh, probably, yeah.
It's probably a good amount of hurries for the Bears' entire defense, honestly. I would be willing to wager that if I had to guess, those 43 hurries would be at least a third of what the Bears had overall this past year, having done no research on the subject whatsoever. And again, it's not that I don't think that Mike Green can be that guy. I think they could. I think you're flipping a coin here. And
I agree.
Frankly, the Bears could choose to flip that coin in whichever way they choose to flip that coin. But I think that James Pierce having the athleticism that he showed off today, and Mike Green could come out and run a 4.45 at his pro day for all we know. And even if he doesn't run a 4.45 or something like that, he could at least run something that has a faster 10-yard split than James Pierce Jr. And normally that 10-yard split is what you're really looking for an edge rusher, because you want to see what's that explosive first step going to look like. How's your burst off the line? I don't need you to run 40 yards. I need you to run 10. I need you to get around these guys. I need you to blow up an offensive lineman and just get to the quarterback as quickly as possible. So Mike Green could be the guy here for that reason. And frankly, he could go above James Pierce. He could go above Shemar Stewart. You might think that he's a safer pick there. But personally, again, with where we are right now, and how I think everything has kind of fallen into place, I'm just going to buy in right now, because James Pierce might not go in the top 10 for another single mock draft that we do for the rest of eternity. Even though I think we both like him out, and obviously you have an intense amount of bias towards him because you're unable to objectively view players in the draft. But
that's the one.
But I like him a lot as well.
Shout out Joe Milton.
Shout out Joe Milton. Shout out every single offensive player to ever come out of Ohio State.
Well, the wide receivers are top notch. You already know that.
Again, I think you're flipping a coin here, and if I had to guess, I don't think Mike Green makes it too much further in this draft class. But we'll see what happens here, and I'll turn it over to you to make the selection for the Niners here at pick 11.
Yeah, man, I'm not even gonna hesitate. This is Will Johnson for me. It's not shown in one of their top needs. I don't know why. Best player available by quite a bit, in my opinion. I guess you can argue that, but still, there's players on this board that I would love at the 49ers, man. Walter Nolan, Kenneth Graham, who I've been talking about, like I talked about Shemar Stewart last week. It feels like every pick. They need some help on the defensive line, so both those guys. There's still every offensive lineman on the board minus Will Campbell. They need offensive line. They need tackle. They need guard. And I think that's the route we went last week. I'm pretty sure. I don't remember for sure, but I know we at least talked about it. Mm-hmm. Josh Simmons, I like for them. Kelvin Banks, I like for them. Membu, I like for them to play right tackle. I could keep going on and on. They're probably going to lose Dre Greenlaw. You can make maybe Jihad Campbell goes as high. Maybe I think Jalen Walker's probably worth this pick, and he's more of an edge guy. But could they use him in that hybrid role for sure? But dude, I'm taking Will Johnson. Their starting corners, they're losing what? They might be losing Ward, right? And then all they have after,
I think all but guaranteed at this point. I think they're guaranteed to lose Charvarius Ward just because of what happened with him personally this past season, which is obviously
correct. I forgot about that.
Terrible tragedy that I would not wish on anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
It's unfortunate for the Niners that it happened because I think that he fits their scheme really well, but situations sometimes come up that are out of your control as a team. And as an organization, I don't think that they would do anything to really stop him from getting out of there if they feel like that's what's best for him. And I think that he is going to wind up expressing, he already really has said that he's not interested in resigning, not to any fault of the Niners organization, but just because the memories of being in his house physically haunt him, which is
needs a fresh start. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so if he's gone, they have Lenoir, and then they have Renaldo Green from Florida State, and then I think Lenoir plays nickelback for them, and then who's going to be their other? I mean, they just don't have anybody. I think Yadam is a free agent. Rocky Sin is a free agent. They have Darrell Luter from South Alabama last year? Darrell Luter Jr. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, you want to make a case that maybe they take Jahdae Barron if they think he's better, sure. But I mean, dude, I think that's the pick for them at 11.
Yeah, but man, you know what would be really fun?
What's that?
Ashton Jeanty in the San Francisco offense would be.
Oh yeah, I think that
it's not a need. They can't really afford to do it. They have Christian McCaffrey for another 2 years.
It would be. I don't even know that Christian would keep them from doing it because like they could just move. Like Christian McCaffrey could just be the new Debo. Like he can play wide receiver, you know. And then you have Jeanty. It's more so for me. Could they do it? Yeah. I mean, if they really somehow figure out free agency and get some of these needs like at corner, at defensive line, edge figured out, offensive line, and they have they feel like they have the ability to make that type of pick, yeah. But if you look at just Shanahan offenses the past forever, like you just put a guy in there that can run that zone style running, and sure, like if you have an elite guy back there, it's going to be even crazier. Like,
so what I'm hearing is Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson is coming back to San Francisco this year.
No, what you're hearing is if they're going to take a guy, they're going to take a Devin Neal in the 3rd or 4th round, and he's going to be off. And they're going to take BPA here, which I think is a bigger need. But I'm pretty sure I've done that before in one of my first mocks I did, just because I thought it was hilarious giving them JT. It just doesn't fit what I feel like they usually like to do, so I would be surprised. So I just think they're going to draft someone, get someone. I mean, this year there's going to be some undrafted guys that are usually draftable, so they'll find depth that way, and I think CMC might be okay for a couple more years.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But it does bring up an interesting conundrum here because Jeanty would be a great fit with the Dallas Cowboys.
Mm-hmm. It would indeed.
Man.
There's a couple good fits here.
Could use an edge rusher. Opposite Micah. And to supplant Micah once he's inevitably gone.
To the Eagles, yeah.
Yep.
Apparently.
But,
I mean, yeah, they have Dexter Lawrence, too. Not Dexter. Why do I keep getting those guys mixed up? DeMarcus. Jesus. Yeah. Second week in a row. The other D. Lawrence. I mean,
I think I'm going to take Josh Simmons.
Think about Jerry Jones.
I know. But I think
I'm not saying Josh. I mean, Josh Simmons would also be a Jerry Jones type of pick. Offensive line or running back. So, yeah. Or a Texas player. Those are the 3 criteria. Or a Boise State player, which I guess Jeanty both. But.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do it. They lost out on Tyron Smith, obviously, last year. I think that they are a team that would be looking for his replacement. It's not easy to replace a Hall of Famer. It's not easy to replace a guy that is as tremendous at left tackle as Tyron Smith was. And I'm not saying that Josh Simmons is necessarily going to be a one-to-one replacement for him.
Josh Simmons, like the only knock, like I'm really like Josh Simmons. The only knock on him.
Of course you do. He's an offensive player from.
Oh, shut up. He had a stretch of just incredible play this year, but then got hurt. But besides this year, he's just been okay, right? Like he's been okay. But the stretch this year, he was if he continued that for the whole year, it'd be an argument between him and Will Campbell, and maybe because Simmons is more of a pure tackle, he could be the first offensive lineman taken. But I think there's some injury concern, and just like, okay, was this just because the offensive line was so stacked, and that the team was so stacked, and that's why he did so well in that short span? But I mean, his pass rush, his pass protection was insane for those handful of games that he was healthy. Yeah, I mean, he's deserving of this type of pick. It's definitely a risk, I think, but that'll be answered at the combine with, when they do like medicals and stuff.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I need to run to the bathroom, so I'm going to let you talk and I'll hop back in. Yeah. But you can let me know who you select when I get back for the Dolphins here.
Yeah. No, I'll go through some scenarios. So, so the Dolphins here, man, like, there's some interesting players that are on the board. I know PFF has their needs being offensive line heavily, guard, tackle. Defensive line, I lost Christian Wilkins last year. They didn't really replace him. I think they're losing Calais Campbell, who was on a 1-year deal. I can't even tell you who their nose tackle is. I think it was Benito Jones, who they're losing to, probably. He's a free agent at least. But their defensive line is not looking good. I think the trenches on both sides of the ball just needed, and then safety if they chip off. So I think PFF did knock that out of the park with their top needs. And those would be the main positions I would be looking at. Sure, maybe you want to look at, okay, let's replace Tyreek Hill. He might not be here for that much longer. Is Luther Burden, Matthew Golden the guy to do that? I don't think it's as big of a need. I'm kind of higher on Jalen Waddle. I think Jalen Waddle could step in. Malik Washington, I think, was under draft. I think he was worth a higher draft pick, and he played pretty well last year. And there's going to be other guys to take, and there's not a guy here that I'm like, yeah. So, in saying that, I think that they would be a candidate for either. It's the same two defensive tackles. Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, I think, make a ton of sense. But then you look at offensive line, and it's just, they have Teron Armstead, who's a really good left tackle for them. They drafted Patrick Paul, but look, Teron Armstead might retire. And if he retires, then you have Patrick Paul, but is he really going to be the long-term replacement? I mean, maybe Austin Jackson at right tackle for you. I just think the offensive line is in such a disarray that it's more so than even defensive line. So for them, would look really, Josh Simmons already won it. So you're kind of between Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas, who he could definitely move into guard. He has a little bit of shorter arms, but he's played left tackle all 3 years there at Texas. So it might be a little bit of a transition for him to move into guard. I think he did a little in high school, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, man, Kelvin Banks, I think, would be the type of offensive lineman they'd really like, because I think he might fit best at guard. And like I was saying, they might lose Armstead, and they're not sure if they're going to keep Teron Armstead or not, or if he's going to retire, I guess. So their offensive line is just a wreck. And you could see the way that they run the offense. They're trying to get the ball out of Tua's hands quick, because, I mean, they don't want to freaking throw up gang signs anymore. And their offensive line is just so. Yeah, so I know you're just getting back. I was just kind of talking about defensive line was a huge need. I mean, they're losing everybody. Mm-hmm. They haven't replaced Christian Wilkins, but if you look at the offensive line, it's just worse. And as much as I think you can make an argument that Nolan and Grant might be the better players, again, we've said this 100 times, without knowing free agency, I think you've got to address the offensive line. And for me, it's Connerly or it's Banks. If you want to go for a little bit more ceiling at tackle, I would go Connerly. Banks just, I think, has a little more versatility to play guard. But the zone running, though, they do. Yeah. I'm going to go Banks.
Perfect.
I think it gives them a little more versatility, and they could need right tackle, left tackle, and guard.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I think that you could make an argument that you don't necessarily need to take Banks here because of the fact that Tua's blind side is his right side. Obviously, having Armstead at that left side is tremendous, but like you said, having the versatility of him being able to play guard, I think is huge.
Well, they could use either tackle, really. I mean, if Banks could play either way, I mean, I'm not sure if he's comfortable on the right side or not.
Right.
Because, I mean, you have Austin Jackson on that side. Like, it's not. He was a little better this last year than he has been, but I just think you need to take an offensive lineman that has versatility. And granted, like, I didn't even think about Membu. I mean, he would be good for them too. But I think Membu, for me, though, the way that Miami wants to run their offense, I think his, running the ball, I think he'd be really good for it. The way that he likes to set his feet and hand fights in, like, the pass block, Miami likes to get the ball out fast, and they kind of like a little bit faster feet in the passing game and like the RPOs and stuff. And he could do that, but I don't know. Banks kind of they ran a lot of that type of stuff at Texas too, so it just kind of has a nice fit for me.
Yeah, I agree.
But I could see all three of those offensive linemen. It just depends on what flavor they're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, Sark definitely ran a very similar style of offense to what the Dolphins were doing. Those jet motions, the wide receiver moving and then taking off from there with that Tyreek motion that the Dolphins ran in 2023 a lot more than 2024. He's used to those sorts of things. It's also an underrated aspect of what they're going to be looking for, I think, is an offensive lineman that's not going to flinch or jump with those different weird intricacies of what the offense is going to be doing. And Banks has experience with that. And again, maybe you can argue that a center needs that more than a tackle does, but I mean, we've seen plenty of times where a guy leans forward just a little bit too much in a situation where those little motions are happening behind him and he just kind of gets lost with what's going on in the field of play. So him having the experience with Texas running a similar style of offense there, I think is going to definitely be tremendous for him. So yeah. Which takes us to the Colts, and like I talked about earlier, the Colts love their combine guys, the guys who can come in with a world of athleticism and just kind of wow everybody in the building from a physical standpoint. Whether that transfers to the field and the gridiron is a different story. But I think that Mike Green here might just be too much of value to pass up on. You can make an argument for a couple defensive backs here. You could say Malachi Starks is really solid at safety. You could say Barron. I don't think Barron's exactly the type of guy that they'd be looking for at quarterback, or cornerback rather. Tight ends, again, if we still had Tyler Warren on the board here, I don't know if he makes it past them. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and lock in Mike Green here. Coming off the edge, I think that he is the twitchy kind of player that they would be looking for. Something that they were hoping Kwity Paye would develop into, and I don't think that he really has to this point. Obviously, they have Latu coming off the other side, but I think that it would not preclude them from taking one here. If a guy like Mike Green slipped to this point, I could see him having that upside the athleticism and all that kind of stuff that they are normally looking for to go ahead and take him here.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, pair, like you said, him with Latu would be a nice little edge group to build around on defense for sure. And he's kind of that prototype, like you said, that they like the draft. So I think it's a good fit. Man, okay, there's two guys here for the Falcons that I low-key think that Raheem's going to love Jahdae Barron and the way that the versatility that he has. I mean, they're picking someone on defense, right? They sent 45, like what? No, all 45 of their combine interviews are people on defense. That's like the first time it's ever happened. Did you not see that?
No.
Dude, you get 45 player interviews, and all 45 are designated defensive players. They only sent members of, that's what I was trying to say, they only sent members of their coaching staff from the defensive side of the ball to the combine.
Yikes.
So, I mean, which I think it's silly, but at the same time, like they need defense so bad. They've been drafting offense in the first round the past like 5 years, like, and just, you know, their offensive line is good. They have weapons. You could argue they need another wide receiver, but like that bad, no. I mean, I think Pitts is still going to be in play to maybe have another chance next year. Running back's good. They think they have their option, and Penix at quarterback. Like, it is what it is. Raheem's a defensive.
That Ashton Jeanty, Bijan Robinson backfield is going to be sick for everything but fantasy.
Jesus, dude, I would be so upset. That would be hilarious, though. But yeah, yeah, Barron to me is it's a weird pairing, but I actually really like it. But I don't think I can get past the Jalen Wall. I think he's going at this point. Like, I know the hype on him is like simmered a lot, just because it's that tweener. It's the whole like, where does he play? Like, and Georgia just used him in so many. Like, they used him as an edge rusher. They used him as an off-ball guy. Like, they used him as a spy. They used him, like, if they wanted to double team tight ends over the middle. Like, if someone had a really good tight end, they'd use him to. I think they did that against Penn State, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, like, he's just so athletic, and the Falcons just need playmakers on defense, which is why it's like Barron or him. Like, I can see that either way. The more that I've got to actually watch Jahdae Barron from this last year, the more that I've ended up liking him. The year prior, I'd watched a little bit, but he was playing mostly slot or I guess nickel, and he looks like he could be an elite nickel. But he played some outside this year. Like, he actually played a lot of outside this year, if I'm not mistaken. More outside than
snaps out of his 71
he looked. He could hold up on the outside, and I think that versatility is just. He's good at tackling. He's good at man, good in zone. I think he's even better in zone. I guess that's what it says on that chart right there too for PFF. At least the way that they graded it. I think in man coverage and the slot, he's better than man coverage on the outside. Mm-hmm. But you just you run the defense that the Falcons run. They don't have their outside corners man to man on islands very often. At least not not all three corners if you're playing nickel. But I'm gonna give them Jalen. I just think that they've needed an edge rush, a good edge rusher. Every draft that we've done, mock drafts, I think. So
yep.
I'm gonna keep mocking them to them, I guess, and they're gonna keep picking offensive players.
Yep, and we've given them Georgia defensive players specifically.
Yeah, I know.
The last 4 years as well.
Probably
so, call us whenever you want, Atlanta. We're listening.
Maybe they're finally listening. They didn't say, they're only going after defensive guys apparently.
Dude,
unless this is all just a big smoke and mirror.
And they wind up taking
Luther Burden, baby.
Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Egbuka.
Yep.
Something
Like,
ridiculous.
it was just too good a value. So.
Which you could make the argument, I guess. I wouldn't be that mad about it, but I don't know, man. The Falcons' defense has been. How do I put this politely?
Ass.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. For the last 5 years, they have not been good at all. There's the reason why a team was able to come back from 28-3 against them in the Super Bowl. And yes, I will blame Kyle Shanahan a good amount for that. I will blame the lack of a run game for that.
Whoa.
Yes, I'm listening.
We're not going to have this conversation right now. Keep going.
We're going to have this conversation right now. I mean, it's going to be a one-sided conversation. I'm just going to mute you. But when you elect to not run the ball with a 25-point lead heading into the fourth quarter, you deserve to be court-martialed, respectfully. So, regardless of the defensive implosion that happened against one of the better quarterbacks of this day and age, if not the greatest quarterback of all time, as much as that pains me to say, and obviously I don't particularly believe that myself. You need some defense. Every once in a while, it'd be a little bit helpful if your defense would show up and play football on the field rather than tiddlywinks, on the sidelines by themselves. So yeah, I think that the Jalen Walker pick is solid for sure. Interestingly enough, and I think a point that I wanted to make here is you highlighted two guys that I think you could identify as potentially the biggest jokers in this defensive class. Walker has some flexibility. He took 61 snaps in the slot as a slot cornerback this year. He lined up there for 61 of his snaps as a linebacker. He lined up at edge a handful of times. He's a guy that you can plug and play at a variety of different positions and just use him as a guy who is going to be nose to the football and finding his way into plays more often than not. And that's something that you need. In my mind, again, when you don't have any defensive playmakers, and yes, I know you're going to say A.J. Terrell and Justin Simmons was there last year, and they have guys on paper. Trey Anderson is a joker-type athletic linebacker who can make plays. He's tall, but truthfully, they just haven't had that guy. And Walker could be that guy. Barron could be that guy. A guy that you didn't talk about that I think could fit into that conversation. Two, losing Justin Simmons would be Malachi Starks. He's another guy that you could fit into that joker role. He probably doesn't fit there quite as well as the other two guys. So I'm not going to fault you for not mentioning him as much. But
I think for me, I just think Starks is going to fall. I'm not because of how I feel, just because, doing this slightly predictive, you just don't see those safeties go. And he didn't have the best year this year, and I think that combined with never seeing safeties go, hardly ever seeing safeties like that play style of safeties at least, that aren't just freak athletes like Jamal Adams or, guys like that. And
where did Budda Baker go? I forget. He was early, wasn't he?
I don't think he was. I don't think he was first round, was he?
Maybe not.
I gotta look. I know he wasn't like top pick. Second round, 36 overall. Yeah. So he was. I mean, that's around the. I mean, Kyle Hamilton, I think, is a better Malachi Starks.
Yeah.
And he fell. I mean, they're probably going to have relatively close to the same athletic profile. Starks might test a little better.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we'll see, but I don't know. I mean, if you look on my big board, I would have Starks in this range.
Yeah.
But it's just
I don't know, man. Because I think that he's another guy that you could refer to as a defensive joker.
Oh, for sure.
That's who Barron is. I think that's who Starks is, and I think that's who Walker is. At the end of the day. And I think it's just a matter of what you're looking for out of that guy. And for a defensive-minded coach, I think that's something that you really want to highlight and play to your strengths on. And something that obviously the Falcons haven't been able to take advantage of in the past few years. But I think as Raheem Morris takes more control of what's going on there, he's going to highlight those positions and focus on them. And he doesn't want to be stuck in a situation where he feels like he doesn't have anybody on defense that he can rely on to make a play. And I think that Walker, I think Barron, I think Starks are all those guys that can make a play. And I think that Walker fits very well for the reasons that you highlighted. They need an edge and a linebacker, and guess who can do both? Jalen Walker. So I think that's a great fit there. Man. The Cardinals need a lot of things.
Indeed.
And maybe tackle is one of those things.
I agree.
Paris Johnson, left tackle last year, obviously worked out pretty well for him.
Yep.
Membu could be a great pick here for him.
I love that pick.
And I think he would fit in well. He would do what they need him to do. Does Trey Benson stop you from taking Eshingenti?
Absolutely not. But they love James Conner, so who knows?
They do love James Conner.
They just signed him to another deal.
Yep. But again, you were talking about this earlier, a guy who could go earlier than we're anticipating. Kenneth Grant, man, he's sitting right there.
I don't think he lasts this long.
Personally. I don't think so either. And I could say the same thing about Walter Nolan. I think they both should be gone by this point. Personally.
I think they both could be. But I just think it might be hard for both of them to go.
Rush the passer a little bit more, I think, and be a more disruptive defensive lineman than what Walter Nolan currently projects to be, which isn't to say that he couldn't do it.
Well, yeah, I mean they're similar in some ways. I think Nolan's going to be a little juiced up from the inside. I think Grant's just like, I mean, they're similar in some ways, but man, like it was almost impossible to run against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, and they both on their own were doing like they were both creating they were getting double teamed both like at the same time, and somehow Michigan was still not doing that well on defense. So I don't know. Their edge rushers still were only just okay. I will say Josiah Stewart was pretty good, but I think he should have been better with the way that those two guys were getting all the attention. And they were still beating blocks. They were still beating double teams. So, crazy.
Cardinals added Darius Robinson last year, right?
Yes. But he's like... I mean, he plays edge for them because they play a...
No, I know. I'm saying I think that...
But
I don't think he had the season that they would have liked him to have, personally.
Yeah, he also didn't start, I don't think. He got rotated in. I think
right.
Dude from Seattle. Collier? I think. LJ Collier, I think he started for them. And then... I think they're losing both of their big defensive tackles, Lopez and I can't think of the other guy. So their defensive line in general is just like...
Yeah, I'm just going to say Kenneth Grant here. I'm not going to overthink it at this point. Again, we've been live for 2 hours now, so...
Well, also think about Jonathan Gannon, what he liked and what he had in Philly. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a good comp in terms of like...
Brandon Graham?
What type of... Like, a good comp in terms of, like, what Philly likes and what he excelled with in Philly, those type of...
Defensive line depth and a rotational defensive line, so yeah.
Right. And that size profile and the way that he defends the run and stuff. Yeah, the Bengals are getting Ashton, so we can just move on from here. Chase Brown doesn't stop me. He just doesn't. If he's there at 17, I think... The way the board is falling, you could easily say they need Walter Nolan, and that would be a fantastic pick. If they somehow do lose T. Higgins, Matthew Golden would be a fantastic pick. Egbuka would be a good pick.
Yeah, keep him in Ohio.
Yeah. Freaking move. What's his name? I mean, Zabel could that would be like the highest I could see him going at guard. Membu, move him into guard. All good picks, but I mean, if they keep Higgins and you got Burrow and you got Higgins and Jamar Chase, and then you have G&T and then Chase as Chase Brown is the the scat back, and you have I mean, they need defense so bad that's the only reason why I'd be like, maybe supplement defense through free agency a little bit, and I just think that would be a gross pairing, so I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, I like it. I think they have a lot to figure out on
They
both
do.
sides of the ball with cap space and how it's going to all function.
Yeah.
In terms of extensions and franchise tags and whatever they're going to wind up doing. I don't really think that they can afford to franchise tag T. Higgins 2 years in a row, and I know that they want to work on a long-term extension with him. But if he just flat out says no, not taking Egbuka here is tough.
Right.
But Ashton Jeanty being here at 17 is also tough.
Also, I mean, if they could get like a Jack Besh in the second round, that would be an awesome pairing there with Burrow. So fixes that wide receiver problem pretty fast. Plus, I mean, Tyler Boyd's a free agent. Just go get Tyler Boyd back.
Yeah.
For
I think
cheap.
It's a tough situation for Ashton Jeanty, where obviously the Cowboys were a team that I was considering taking him. I think the Bears are a team that would consider taking him, but there's a lot of teams kind of in between that don't really need him. And again, whether they choose to not take him because they don't need him, or whether they choose to not take him because there's other needs that they have higher, becomes a point where the best player available is the best player available. And
for sure,
I think he is pretty much at this point head and shoulders over the second best player available. And we're getting to that point in the draft where needs become less important than getting the value that you want out of a player. So, is Chase Brown solid? Sure, I'm not saying he's not. But is Chase Brown a guy that you really want to build your entire team around? No. Probably not. Ashton Jeanty, on the other hand, could be that guy. And
you get him for 5 years cheaply.
Hasn't ever had a running back that has the abilities and the overall success that Jeanty has had to this point. And again, Jeanty played against lesser talent at Boise State. You can make that argument for sure. But, I mean, are you taking Ashton Jeanty or are you going to take Chase Brown in a vacuum? It's not even a question. I'm taking Ashton Jeanty 100 times out of 100.
And you just find ways to use both until Chase Brown's a free agent.
And that too.
I mean, keep him fresh.
Exactly. So.
Plus, we can't have him fall to the Broncos, because if he falls to the Broncos, then we can take him in the mock drafts, and I'll be upset when he doesn't fall to me in real life.
Yep. That's true. That is true. The Seahawks.
Sea chickens. Yeah, there's a few ways you could go here.
Yeah, this is another one where, again, if we're talking about outside the top 10, I know I talked about this earlier with the Raiders being a team that's very free agency dependent. And I kind of think I feel the same way about the Seahawks. They have needs right now, but I think that they are a team where what they choose to do in free agency is going to really determine what they're looking to do in the draft. And again, this is a asinine conversation to some extent because you can make that argument for pretty much any team picking in the bottom 16 here. You're looking at the playoff teams and those borderline playoff teams that didn't quite make the cut. So, with the way that the board fell and what the Seahawks team looks like, Jihad Campbell is really sticking out to me as a guy that I feel like is a just plug and play defensive leader, somebody who can run the offense the way that they're going to want to run it.
Yep, he'd be an awesome quarterback.
Well, I definitely meant to say that the way that I said it, and didn't mean defense at all. Let me retract that statement and say that he would run the defense the way they want to run it. The Seahawks defensive linebacker core has been highlighted by Devin Bush and who did they have this last year?
Bobby Wagner's mom.
Well, Bobby Wagner was in Washington. I know that for a fact.
I know, I'm just kidding.
But in 2023,
they had.
it was definitely Bobby Wagner, Devin Bush.
They traded for Ernest Jones.
Oh, right, which worked out really well for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and they had
So yeah, I'm taking Jihad Campbell, and I'm not really going to think too much harder about it. I don't really feel the need to express too much more.
Their other middle linebacker is Trice Knight.
What'd you say?
Their middle linebacker is Trice Knight.
Trice Knight?
I don't know who that is.
I don't think that's a real human being.
He 24 years old from UTEP.
That is certainly.
It's like he wasn't drafted.
He was a 4th round pick last year.
Oh, was he? Yeah, dude, I don't know. It's one of those. It's one of those Seahawks picks that you just, when they make it, you're like, yeah, I don't know who it is, but it's Seahawks, so I'll just forget about it. I don't know. I know nothing about him.
They're taking Jihad Campbell, and I'm not going to think twice about it.
Yeah, I like it. I like it, Jihad. That's what I was kind of thinking too. I mean, they need interior offensive line, but man, I don't think they're going to do it. They never drafted that early, and I'm sure they'll just take some guys later, or like you said, free agency. So,
right,
Jihad.
And they could. I mean, Tyler Booker here is getting close to being value, in terms of how well I think he grades out to play at the NFL level.
I agree.
And that might be what you did last week. I honestly don't remember.
I think it was.
And I wouldn't hate it here. I just think that looking at the way the board fell, I think Campbell is a guy that is immediately plug and play. And at a certain point, they were competitive in that division last year. Despite having a weirdly not productive offseason and not really being on anybody's radar. They played I'm just going to put it this way. They played way better last year than I thought they were going to.
I think
that has to count for something. So
I think their defense
immediately plug and play and is a difference maker in the middle of that defense, I think can be something that might actually push them over the hump, especially if the Niners have more injuries this year, and if Stafford does wind up leaving the Rams, that division's wide open. So why not try to make a guy push for a guy that might make a difference to your team right now? The Niners should be back next year. If Stafford doesn't get traded, the Rams are right in that conversation. But the Seahawks got to do something. And until we really see what happens out of free agency for him, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I'm struggling with the Bucks. I think they're another team that horrifically needs an edge rusher, like so bad that you even like if they don't address it in free agency at all, like you just gotta take your favorite edge rusher that's left. Like it's almost that bad. I wouldn't hate. It's a little early, but Izaraku and Jack Sawyer. I'm higher on Sawyer than I think consensus, but both of those guys, I wouldn't be shocked if they went here, if the board fell this way. I think they both fit the scheme on defense that they like to run. They're both aggressive. They're both can work a little bit on their run defense. I think they both have a little bit of work there, but Jack Sawyer, at least the second half of the season, looked really good at stopping them. So Izaraka is a little more of the speed rusher, whereas Sawyer, I think, has a little more power to him. But they both would fit well. I just think Barron is going to go before this, and they could use another defensive back. Or this is a round where he might go, so I'm looking at that. Starks obviously would be a good pick. I just don't see him doing it. I would like the pick. I just don't see him doing it as of right now, unless I hear something different about him going higher. I'm way lower on Michael, obviously, because he's just worse. Trayvon Walker. I think he's going to go in the first round, but he also, in my opinion, just I don't know that he's the edge that Tampa wants. I think he's just a better 4-3 end versus a 3-4 outside linebacker. He could do both, but personally, I would take those other two edges over him, especially for Tampa. But again, I'm kind of a Michael hater. I'm gonna give him Barron. I think I always see someone giving them edge, and I think Barron, kind of like we said with Atlanta, like Tampa Bay's defense is way better. But you think about how many games Baker had to just like score 40 points to win the game, especially those Falcons games where they both defenses were just so bad that Kirk threw for like 500 yards and Baker was having to throw for 400. Like it was just stupid. They need some guys that can cover a little better back there, and I think Barron could kind of help with that a lot.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go that way, make it a little different, and I could see them really liking his, like I said before, his versatility with the Falcons. Like I think the versatility he'd have there in Tampa with I almost said Lovie Smith. That's hilarious. With what's the head coach's name, man? Todd Bowles. Jesus, my brain's not working today. Yeah, the way that he likes to use his secondary pieces, I would honestly think Barron he'd line him up at nickel and he'd line him up at safety. He'd be doing.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be moving him around.
Yeah, I think that it's between Barron and my mind, and even Starks. They let Jordan Whitehead know they weren't going to bring him back this year too.
Yeah.
And having a guy like that they could use as a box linebacker, that they could use as a deep safety, that they could use as that hybrid strong safety type role, I could see working well too. But it's tough to know with any of those. And again, I'm going to use this term again: Joker type defenders, Barron, Starks. Walker. It's just tough to see where they go because they could slip further and further because again you're having these conversations about these guys being positionless. Isaiah Simmons from a few years ago is kind of not too dissimilar from Malachi Starks.
Besides coverage skills, yes.
Right. I think
that's
Malachi
like the
Starks
one thing I think.
Better coverage skills than Isaiah Simmons did, which is why
I think
Isaiah
Simmons
being a mostly linebacker type
player. Right. Yeah. I think Starks' versatility is more of like safety versus nickel, whereas Simmons is linebacker versus like the split safety, I guess.
Right.
But yeah,
Simmons
I mean,
grades out better as a Jamal Adams type safety than Malachi Starks, who grades out better as a Kyle Hamilton type safety.
Yeah.
That might be.
No, I mean I couldn't think of anybody else off the top of my head, but I think him and Hamilton have lots of similarities.
Which is also probably because I like Starks a lot and I like Hamilton a lot. Until he got to the Ravens, and obviously he's one of the worst defenders in all of football. So.
Yeah, well. You'll be saying that about Abdul Carter too when he falls to freaking 27.
When Abdul Carter goes to the Browns and gets buried by one of the worst franchises in the NFL. Anyway, Broncos. So the Broncos could use a handful of things here. Starks would be a sick add to that secondary. But for a team that had the defensive success that they had this year, I think that in their first round pick, they really have to target an offensive player. Whether that's wide receiver, whether that's tight end, remains to be seen. I think until we get a little bit further into the process. But
I think low-key, it could also even be running back. I think
it could be. And I think if Genty had fallen here, I would have taken him with no questions asked. At that point, it's the best player available. It's a very Sean Payton-style running back. It is a guy that is immediately plug-and-play. He's a three-down player. Yes, I think that they like McLaughlin a lot. I think they like Estime a lot. But, again, neither of those guys are stopping from taking Ashton Genty. And if Ashton Genty gets hurt, great, you have a fallback plan, a contingency of a speedy wide receiver that can catch the football and a power back that can just pound it at the goal line. But Ashton Genty offers you the full package of both of those guys in one player. With, obviously, the snaps played, he ran the ball 375 times last year, which is not an insignificant number, in case that number seemed low to you. So he's the kind of guy that you probably have faith in to stay healthy for the most part, especially with all the work that Denver's put in the past few years with their training staff, their strength and conditioning coaching as well. To really make an effort to improve on the injury front and side of things. But there's a couple other things. I mean, is it too early to go linebacker here? Probably. But Schlesinger is a guy that could be a borderline first-round pick here. I think that Demetrius Knight has a lot of solid talent as well. But again, like I mentioned, I think it's coming down to offense for me. You have a guy in Bo Nix who looks like he is a bona fide quarterback, who did it with less this past year. Obviously, Sutton I like a lot. Marvin Mims I thought contributed really well as the season kind of progressed, but they had no run game, and they certainly did not have any tight ends at all. So it makes it tough for me to not force a tight end here.
I don't know that it's a force, but I agree.
But with the way that the board fell, there's only one wide receiver that's been taken so far, and Egbuka really does feel like a Bo Nix kind of wide receiver.
I wouldn't be mad about it.
I know you wouldn't.
Not to sway your pick, because I know it's not, and I'm not trying to, but it's just wild, because I didn't realize it was this low. Our leading tight end last year in terms of yards was 188.
It's impressive.
188. And then number 2 was, like, it was split up between 3 guys, really. It was 188, 152, and 150. And that was it. So, like, yeah, it's
so your
insanity.
Top 3 tight ends combined for 500 yards is what I'm hearing.
Pretty much. Yeah. Which is crazy. But yeah, just thought I'd throw that tidbit in there because I didn't know it was that low.
I appreciate you spoiling my pick because I was going to take Colston Loveland anyway. But it wasn't going to stop me from taking him. Getting Egbuka or any of the wide receivers here, I think is a good add to that offense. But let's just take a look here real quick at wide receivers. So the fact that we're sitting here at pick number 20, and one wide receiver has been taken so far, and what most people would consider not a top-end wide receiver class. Like last year we had Marvin Harrison, we had Malik Neighbors, we had Ladd McConkey, we had Rome Odunze. So there was a lot of guys at the top of that draft class that you were like, dude, these guys are going to be starters. Day one, plug and play, great guys. I'm not saying that Burden and Egbuka and Golden are not those guys, but let's compare right now to tight ends. So if we get rid of that and just look at tight ends alone, Colston Loveland, and then I think the drop-off to Gunnar Helm, Arroyo, Mason Taylor, I think that drop-off is much more significant in my minds than the drop-off between Burden, Egbuka, and Golden into the Alik and the Betch and Restrepo, Higgins. These are all guys that should theoretically be there with the second-round pick for the Broncos that Colston Loveland's not going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, you can make the argument, like, we need more wide receivers. I'm sure, but I mean,
It wouldn't
besides
hurt.
Sutton,
Again, if Troy Franklin lives
Mims
up to
and
what he can
Franklin,
be, right?
right? There's a chance there. You still need to add somebody somewhere, whether it's free agency or draft. Somebody somewhere needs to be added to the room.
Right.
But your argument is definitely correct. I think tight ends just, and it is that joker player that Sean Payton's been talking about. That's what Colson Loveland is. He is maybe the perfect tight end joker player that you. I mean, you could argue Warren, but at the same time, like, I think there's an argument to be made if you want more of the inside pass catching tight end with the route running. That, I mean, it is Loveland. It just depends, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think, again,
I wouldn't hate it.
are you looking for your next Jimmy Graham, or are you looking for your next Jeremy Shockey? And
yeah, for sure.
If both players are on the board, I think you probably take Tyler Warren for the upside.
I agree.
If Sean Payton had his pick of the litter, I think that's the direction you go. I think Jeremy Shockey, from a potential standpoint, and what he adds to an offense, the depth, the versatility, the different things that he can do fundamentally, adds a big component to his game that Loveland doesn't provide you. But at the same time, I am not trying to talk down on Colson Loveland at all. I think that he is, again, when I talk about Jimmy Graham versus Jeremy Shockey, there's a good chunk of the people, if I made that comparison and said, who would you choose? That would take Jimmy Graham, because the stretch of dominance that he had in New Orleans, of getting to the point where when he was eligible for the franchise tag, his camp pushed for him to be considered as a wide receiver because of how often he was used as a receiving threat at a time when that wasn't super common. I mean, that was what, 2012, 2013, so you had like
Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, I guess.
Tony Gonzalez and
Shannon Sharp forever ago.
Yeah, like you had a handful of guys at that position that were utilized in a way that they were used, and obviously, as we've gotten further into it, the tight end position has really developed to encompass significantly more receiving opportunities. Yes, you still want a guy who can block. Yes, you still want a guy who can kind of do it all. But it's become almost vital. I mean, again, let's look at the Super Bowl teams for the past however many years. Travis Kelce, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, Rob Gronkowski. Like, these are guys who are there for a reason. There was the Bengals-Rams Super Bowl that I guess didn't really have a over-the-top. Like, Tyler Higbee's okay.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, it is a serious difference maker, because think about the mismatches that are created by that position. Generally speaking, I mean, Travis Kelce for years has been a nightmare for teams to defend, because do you put a linebacker on him? Okay, he outruns him. Do you put a safety on him? Okay, he's too big. Do you put a cornerback on him? Okay, he's also still too big. Like, you don't have the ability to work that all in. And again, if the Broncos put themselves in a position where they're in a division with Travis Kelce, who's now an old man and can't really move anymore, Brock Bowers, and whatever the Chargers decide to do at tight end, they're going to be right up there in terms of the best tight ends in the division, the best tight ends in the NFL, the best offense in the NFL, because the more of a mismatch that you can create with that position, if it's drawing a cornerback, if it's drawing a safety, you can take shots to your wide receivers. If it's drawing a linebacker, then you probably have a pretty good mismatch with your tight end. So I think that
and you look at Sean Payton, who uses the tight ends more than everybody. Like, he's one of the biggest tight end user, like, throughout history of it. Like, I mean, past couple years he's tried to, but by the end of the season it's like, you know, can't.
To a pretty large extent, Sean Payton's been kind of playing the cards that he's been dealt with Greg Dulcich and Russell Wilson, obviously, before this last season. But you look at how early and well he connected with Bo Nix, and he basically said, Bo Nix is going to be our guy. To the point that, was it Jay Glazer that just came out with that story about it, where he like texted and called him like multiple times a day, being like, "We're gonna get sniped.
He was freaking
Somebody
out,
else gonna
thinking
take
the
him,"
Rams.
and was
Rams,
paranoid
yeah.
that the Rams were gonna take him. And basically, he called Sean McVay and was like, "Hey, can I please tell Sean Payton that you're not gonna frickin' take Bo Nix because he will not stop driving me nuts." And
Awesome.
I thought that was a pretty funny story because it's not often that an NFL coach just openly shows their hand like that. But
yeah, well, it also is just all the people. Oh, well, the Broncos just took Bo Nix because he was quarterback. Like, no, that's not what happened. If Sean Payton's not tying himself to a first round quarterback unless he's pretty confident with what he sees. Like, I mean, the Saints never took one. They never took. Granted, they had Drew Brees. Like, I get that, but they had opportunities to do it. And yes, they wanted to take Mahomes, didn't fall to him, whatever. But with what happened with Russ, he wasn't just going to take another guy. And
right.
I mean, it was also just a. And to be honest, I think Colson Loveland is this year's Bo Nix in terms of like. For like what months people were saying, oh well, Bo Nix is probably going to, just because of the fit. And I mean, I obviously wanted that to happen, and it made sense to me. I feel like Loveland's kind of, it's not as much, you're picking at 20, you're not picking at, 12? So there's more variance that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But if Loveland's here and someone doesn't drop from, doesn't fall down the board that they just are in love with, more value-wise, it just seems like too easy of a pairing to. I mean, that is the type of tight end those need. Like him or Warren, like either one. They need someone that can have an impact like that in the passing game, because we just haven't had that. We tried to get it with Dulcich. He was never healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't think he blocked enough or had that physical dog in him enough. Like, Loveland isn't a huge run blocker, but if you watch his tape, he is in there effort-wise. And he's not a bad run blocker. He's just not Kittle, Tyler Warren. Like Warren even has his faults, but he's way more physical in the run game than like Loveland, obviously.
Yeah. And with Greg,
but
we had that same thing happen with Coby Fleener, kind of, to an extent, in New Orleans, where when Coby Fleener left the Colts to go to the Saints, I was big on Coby Fleener. I thought he was going to be a tremendous asset for that team because they had lost Jimmy Graham not that long before. They were trying to supplement that tight end position, and Coby Fleener had the size, he had the speed, he had the athleticism that I was like, dude, Sean Payton's going to make this guy legit. And obviously health didn't help there either, but he was not physical enough in the run game for Sean Payton to feel comfortable putting him on the field. And that matters. And I'm not saying that Colson Loveland is going to be the best blocking tight end in this draft class. I don't think that's true at all. But having the hybrid where you are sufficient enough as a run blocker that you can hold your own, we don't need to sub you out to put in a different guy, which the Broncos have had to do now with Adam Troutman for 3 years in a row.
Yep.
Having a guy that can just play the position that he's designed to play, where if he's lined up one-on-one with a linebacker, you trust that 8 to 9 times out of 10, he's going to win the block long enough for your running back to make the maneuvers that he needs to. It makes a difference. It makes a huge difference in terms of your comfortability. And again, how many times did the Broncos have to show their hand by putting Adam Troutman out on the field compared to a Greg Dulcich, compared to a Lucas Kroll, where if Kroll was in the game, you're like, okay, well, this is probably a pass. You can defend that significantly differently as a defense and saying, okay, like, we see this one guy on the field, they're probably doing it this way.
Right. And if you aren't going to be that blocker, then you need to be elite enough to be able to basically be a slot wide receiver.
That's exactly what I was just going to say.
And Loveland could do that too. So, I mean, I'm telling you, his route running, it's one of the best that I've seen from a college tight end. Like, if they actually had a quarterback last year, like, if you go and watch Colson Loveland tape, the quarterback play might have been some of the worst quarterback play that I have ever seen from, like, a big time school. like that. Like it was. I mean, you got to really see Colson Loveland's ability to go get jump balls because he was having to stop and run 3 yards backwards to go get a ball that was thrown up in the air. Like, it was stupid. But anyways,
yeah.
You're not gonna. Well, I think I might know what I do here, Steelers. I had an idea, and I didn't. I don't. You probably wouldn't have liked it, but the more that I think about it, I don't think I'm gonna do it. Man, I just feel like the Steelers, they just don't draft first round wide receivers, man. They just don't do it. They don't. That's the only thing stopping me. I just think Derek Harmon or Walter Nolan are just they're gonna take one of those defensive lines. Because you have to plan for after Cam, and you rotate those guys in, even if Cam plays for a couple more years. It doesn't matter. You guys have good depth there already. You have some guys at least. I could just see them taking the best defensive. It's such a good defensive line class, and this is like the sweet spot for taking these guys. And it's the same argument you just made, like in the second round. I mean, go get a Trey Harris, like if he's still there. I don't know if he will. Go get I'm so high on Jalen Royal, like he'd be a home run pick. I know you probably want Burden, and that would be an awesome pick. In Golden, I think both of those guys. Ibuka too. I mean, dude, like you can't go wrong with any three of those guys being. They could all three be an awesome compliment to Pickens if Pickens ends up sticking around and being. I was gonna say, fixing his issues in his head, but I don't think that's ever gonna happen. I think it's too late. But at least being maybe a little bit better of a teammate, making a little bit better decisions on the field, to where they keep him around. I think all three of those wide receivers there's a good case for them fitting really well with what Arthur Smith wants to do. Obviously, you don't know what you guys have at quarterback. Kind of makes it difficult, but you guys need another playmaker for sure. Obviously, I like Roman Wilson a lot. I think he could be a nice slot option for you guys if he comes back and show some of the route running that he showed his last year at college. He didn't really get to play like at all this year. I'm pretty sure, right? He didn't. Did he have any targets? Do you know? I don't know that he was active for only a couple games, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but regardless, I mean,
according to this article from 11 hours ago, the Steelers at no point had a legitimate level of confidence that Roman Wilson understood the offense. So that's pretty sweet.
One of those things you can't measure, man. Football IQ, it's hard to measure that.
He only
like being
played
able to
one game and had no stats, so.
Yeah.
And I don't think he played. I think that he was just active. I don't think he.
Yeah, I don't remember
seeing. He played 5 snaps.
I knew it was something low. Oh man, I have a hard. I know you would like the Nolan pick.
I
can see them.
I picked my player for you and did not.
I know. I'm not basing it. Well, I'm not even basing it on what I would do. I'll tell you what I would do. I would take either Ibuka or Golden. It'd be a toss-up. That's 100% what I would do for sure. Not that I'm just trying to think. You know what? Screw it. We're not doing super predictive. I'm gonna go Matthew Golden. I think. I hate it, but I just love what I've seen from Matthew Golden, dude. He's so good. I think he's a little bit less safe than Ibuka. Ibuka, I think, is just going to be a good wide receiver, no matter what. Golden, there's a little bit of risk there, but I think if for some reason you move on from Pickens, there's a world where Golden could be a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. So I think that possible ceiling for him, it just makes it an easy pick. So that's what.
I think Ibuka's floor is a very reliable wide receiver too.
For sure.
With that being said, actually, I'm just not going to bury the lead. I'm going to take him right here to the Chargers. They could use wide receiver. There's a handful of positions I could see him taking, but with Ladd McConkey as a wide receiver 1 for them, which I think he grades out to be at this point, they need a wide receiver badly. I don't think that Quentin Johnson is it. He could be a wide receiver 3. He could be a burner. He could be a deep threat. He could be a something for you. You can make the argument, I think, that Egbuka and Ladd McConkey are similar enough that maybe you don't do that. But I think they are unique enough in what they do that I feel comfortable making that decision.
I agree.
Egbuka is the all-time Ohio State leading receiver in terms of yards. But was never the best wide receiver at any point in his Ohio State career, which is a crazy thing to think about for a first-round wide receiver, right? Like, that doesn't happen ever, really.
No. Yeah.
But he was overshadowed. I don't want to say overshadowed because that sounds way too negative, because Egbuka clearly, I mean, let's just look at the numbers real quick. He had 1,000 yards this year. I think he got hampered by injuries in 23, but he had 1,100 yards in 2022. So, you know, you're looking at a guy who is basically a perennial 1,000-yard threat at wide receiver. And yes, I know in a 17-game season, a 1,000-yard wide receiver doesn't really mean anything. Shout out Mike Evans, barely getting in week 17, week 18, one of the worst wide receivers I've ever seen in my life. But he's a guy that just has that level of production to him. So, agreed, 100%. And what I wanted to say about your pick with Matthew Golden is, like you said, if they do decide to move on from Pickens at some point, he offers at least enough upside that he could be a wide receiver 1. And I do feel the same way about Luther Burden as well. But you know I love Matthew Golden. We've talked about this off camera a bunch of times. But if the Steelers are choosing between the 2 or 3 in the first round, I would take Golden first, Egbuka second, and Burden third.
I agree.
I do agree with you as well. Harmon and Nolan could have easily been potential selections here. We are clearly highlighting defensive line in the people that we've been looking at in the pre-draft process. Golden just offers a different level of explosiveness and just upside at the wide receiver position. Yes, his floor is a little bit lower than I think Burden and Egbuka, because Burden didn't have a quarterback this past year. Whereas Golden, in theory, did, even though Quinn Ewers is ass and really shouldn't be considered a quarterback.
If he had a better quarterback, he would have had a crazy season, I think. Right. If Arch would have played the whole season.
Yes.
But that's neither here.
Again, we're looking at a guy that he had just under 1,000 yards receiving.
Right. I mean, he still had a good year. I just think he would have had like an insane year.
Correct. I agree.
So,
but I think that the catch radius that I've seen out of him, some of the just, and again, this is a horrible way of looking at players. Is looking at a highlight reel for a player, because you're missing all the lowlights, and you can put together a fairly decent clip of a guy making really nice plays, juxtaposed with some bad play as well. I mean, Quentin Johnson, I could put together a highlight reel for. It wouldn't be very long, but I could do it. Again, with his height, speed, and his profile, he has the tools to be that guy. Christian Watson, those sorts of guys all kind of play that role, but when you look at the injuries, when you look at the lack of hands, it just kind of falls apart. And I have watched enough just regular game film that's not highlight reels of Matthew Golden that I at least feel comfortable with him, even on downs where I don't think he plays 100% the way that he should have played a particular down. I think that it is productive enough that he is a guy that I feel very comfortable taking at 21. And realistically, with the guys who are going to be there, is very close to the top of my list. If the Steelers feel confident that George Pickens has matured enough mentally this past offseason that they feel comfortable giving him an extension at some point this offseason, or they talk to him and they feel confident that he wants to be here for a decent amount of time, and they are dead set on finding their wide receiver 2 and not having 2 wide receiver 1s, which, by the way, has kind of been the Steelers' way of doing things for the last I don't know how long. They had Antonio Brown, who was pretty obviously a wide receiver 1, but before Antonio Brown, they had Emmanuel Sanders, who was at the bare minimum a very good wide receiver 2, if not a wide receiver 1, which he was at the time that we had him. Mike Wallace was in that conversation. Then with Antonio Brown, you had Juju, who I think is probably more of a wide receiver 2, but during the time that we had Antonio Brown, he was drawing double teams. He was good enough to be our wide receiver 1 for like a year. And then you had Deontay Johnson, whose route running abilities and all that ability to get open, I think, is good enough for him to be a wide receiver 1. And then you have George Pickens, who's pretty clearly good enough to be a wide receiver 1, enough that you move on from Deontay Johnson, and obviously failed to replace his talents offensively, which is unfortunate for our past season. But we like to draft those guys that have the wide receiver 1 upside. And again, to your point, like you said, the Steelers do not draft wide receiver in the first round. They don't do it. They do not ever do that.
Yeah, I was putting money on I wouldn't be putting them with a wide receiver here.
But with the way that the board fell, I can't be mad at it either. Like,
oh no, I would want this if I was you.
You could take a defensive back. You could take a defensive lineman. If Barron is there at that pick, maybe you take him as a joker type player. It's a tough one to see what happens with free agency, because quarterback is a huge need for us, and maybe we're having this conversation that Jackson Dart is worth a 4th-round pick here. At some point in a couple weeks. I don't love it. I don't want to do that. As a Steelers fan, I would be upset if we did that, because it means that we don't get one of the guys that I would actually like in free agency, or via a trade. But it's something that we could identify that's the best opportunity that we have.
For sure.
So anyway, that leads me into Ibuka. I think he fits really well in that Harbaugh offense. I think it's a phenomenal weapon to add to Justin Herbert's arsenal. Running back is obviously a concern, but I think that there's enough running backs in this class that you can draft one later. Honestly, Caleb Johnson would be great there with the offensive line that they have. Hampton here I could have taken. If Henderson is there with their 2nd-round pick, that would be disgusting. Although you'd be pissed if the Broncos didn't take him with their 2nd-round pick, I think. Judkins feels like a Jim Harbaugh type running back.
Yes, I do think so.
Scatterboo,
I think they'd make.
Sampson, I don't think would be a tremendous fit there, but again, you're just talking about value at that point, and any of the top.
Yeah, he's more physical than people give him credit for.
At that pick, and be tremendous value for the Chargers, I think, at that point.
Yeah. It can go a lot of ways, too. I think getting more weapons on offenses, that and, replacing the older edges eventually, if there was, an edge here that fell, somehow Mike Green fell or something, then okay. They'd probably do something like that. But speaking of edges, this pick for me is very easy, because with the Packers here, they take player profiles. They have these positions have to have this long of arms, they have to run this fast, they have to be this way, all these things. They are one of the teams that do that heavily, especially with defensive linemen or edge. And I just think that there's a Georgia edge here that I'm not a huge fan of, but Mykel Williams, he's going to be drafted on just selfish traits. And he fits the bill of being a Packers edge rusher to a T, so I'm going to go ahead and tee that one up. And, yeah.
The only thing I would say, personally, if the board fell this way, is I could really see it being a wide receiver run here, and they go Luther Burden.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
I agree 100%.
I know I did that for the Steelers. I didn't do what I thought I did, but I don't know. I just like the
process that it doesn't really fucking matter at this
point. I know.
The Packers.
I can see Burden, but also think about this though. How much different is Burden from Reed really? They're close. Now, does Reed keep you from drafting Burden? No, but they just have so many of these. I don't know. I think it'd be a good pick. I also think that if it was like Matthew Golden, I'd feel differently.
I mean, again,
I don't
we're
know.
looking
I'm
at
also
the second round range. They could take a Jalen Royals. They could take a
Higgins would be the type of receiver they need.
Savion
They need
Williams.
some, yeah, just take another Christian Watson. No, I guess they're more the same, but
Yep.
Big, tall, fast. Except Watson's not good after the catch, and Savion's really good after the catch. But anyways,
this is a weird one, man. Vikings do running back very badly, and Hampton's sitting right here. I like Trayvon Henderson for them better overall. As a Aaron Jones with more upside, which we talked about last week. I know you touched on that heavily.
There's a Bama player here sitting too. I think that would round out their offense pretty well.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Booker, I would assume.
Yeah.
Booker would be great for them, but I think that they might look at defense here.
And
see that again, Walter Nolan and Harmon both being here make this a very tough conversation.
Harmon, if you think they want someone that's going to be an elite passer, Nolan, if you want a little more well-rounded, but more elite, they're very two different players.
Yep, I agree, but I think that they both are things that they kind of have a need for at this point. And
for sure.
Again, when I'm trying to think through what the rest of the division has, because that's really what you're kind of trying to plan for to an extent when you're looking
Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs,
yeah.
Maybe Ashton Jeanty.
Yep. So
yeah, maybe
you need someone that can defend the run, and I think that they have enough talent on their defense to play the pass that they don't necessarily need to force Harmon here. It wouldn't be a bad pick by any means, and I think that they could certainly decide to go that route if they choose to, but to me, Walter Nolan here should have been gone a while ago.
Yeah, and he's a stud.
I just think that he fits too well with them, and
I agree.
AFC North football, man, it's that smash mouth. It's you're gonna hit somebody in the mouth, and they're gonna feel you there. And again, obviously Dan Campbell's not their head coach, but he's in that division for a reason. It's the way that they play football. It's the AFC North, the NFC North. They both play hard-nosed, run the ball down your throat, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and what's gonna do you better when it's got a foot of snow on the ground in Lambeau than a big beefy BJ Raji defensive tackle? So
there's a name.
Obviously, they play in a dome, so it doesn't really apply to them for half their games, but I still said it regardless, and I'm going to stand by my my call.
Boom skis in the chat, we lost the game. So when I inevitably forget that Walter Nolan's no longer on the board and forget that Derek Harmon is on the board, and you make fun of me, it's going to happen because I accidentally clicked Derek Harmon, and I'm totally going to forget. He's available, so I'm just pre-warning you for that. This one's going to be short for me. The Texans, they lost Diggs. They're going to lose Diggs, it seems like. I would be shocked from whatever if they bring him back. And Tank Dell's probably not playing for at least a year, maybe even longer. I mean, if he does come back this year, I'd be shocked if it's, if he's playing a lot of snaps. I'd be shocked if he plays full-time snaps ever again, to be honest. I think that if they want to maximize what he can do, you use him 60% of the time and not 85, 90%. Maybe 70% of the time, get him into certain formations. Anyways, I'm going to take Luther Burden here because I just think they need some juice. And Luther Burden I'm not as big on Burden. I like him a lot. I think he's first round, probably should be a first round pick. If not, early second. I think that's good value. But pairing him with Nico Collins for Stroud, give him a guy you just get the ball in his hands. He might not be the most technical, savvy route runner, but you get him on bubble screens. He's good down the field, catching the ball. He's good at tracking the ball down the field, over his shoulder catches, and he's physical for being what he's like. He's under 6 foot, but he kind of plays like a 6'1" player sometimes too. So it seems like an easy pairing for me with him still on the board.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And again, to your point, they have those. I don't know. They have the ability to have a wide receiver do those sorts of things anyway, as it is. Kind of.
Burden being a wide receiver 2 on a team is ideal, in my opinion.
And Nico Collins has the ability to just take pressure off of him, and he has the ability to take pressure off of Nico. So being able to stretch the field in that way, horizontally rather than vertically, I think is equally as important.
Yeah.
When you're looking at trying to maximize what Stroud is going to be able to do for the rest of his career. I think he got figured out a little bit this season, and that's a big reason why they moved on from Bobby Slowick. But adding a bona fide wide receiver 2 that has wide receiver 1 upside, which I think Burden does, is a big deal for them. It's something that should certainly help them. He's definitely an upgrade on John Mechie, who I think is their de facto wide receiver 2 at this point if Tank Dell's out. Without
him or just Veer Hutchinson,
yeah, one of the two.
Yeah,
so
probably Mechie though. I'm interested to see what you do here. I think I know what I would do, but there's a couple.
I want to hear what you would do. I have my pick already, so I'm not going to be swayed, and I will refuse to do what you say unless you also say the same thing. But I don't think you're going to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have two thoughts for me. The first one, I don't remember. I think I just do this a lot of my mock drafts, but if Connerly falls, they just need offensive line so bad, and he's like the absolute, just perfect offensive line pairing for them. What they'd like. Like, he might be the most Sean McVay offensive tackle that I've ever seen. It's just a match made in heaven scheme-wise. So that would be the first thought that I have for sure. Now, a little bit spicier of a take that if I wasn't going to go that route, and you could say Membu because they just need tackling, right? I just think Connerly's a better fit if I had to choose one. Stark's obviously good value. I don't think that I just don't think they would do it. But if I wanted to be a little spicy here, I think Carson, good old linebacker Schwessinger.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Would be my pick for them, man, because they're the way that they run defense, that athletic linebacker back there like that who can go sideline to sideline. I mean, I just like it on how they like to run defense. So that was going to be my spicy pick.
Well, that's who I was going to take for them too. So I really appreciate that tremendously. He's listed here as 6'2", 225. He weighed in today at 242.
Yeah, they list him as that because he plays so fast. They're just like, oh, he has to be 225.
Well, I think he played that weight. I think he played that weight at UCLA, and I think that he put on weight in the offseason. I
also think it's possible he just gained weight throughout the year because that just tends to happen.
Very possible too, but
yeah, it's still
had an almost 40-inch vert. He's already 6'2.5". Like, he has a lot of the intangibles, and yes, we haven't seen him run yet. We haven't seen a lot of these things out of him, but it's tricky because when you look at him, he really only has 1 year as a starter. I think he had some health concerns the past couple seasons before 2024 too, but
yeah,
he is such a Rams focal piece. Yeah. I mean, again, the Rams added Bobby Wagner, right, before he went back to the Seahawks? Am I making that up?
He was on the Rams, yes. So yeah.
Like, they just like having a difference maker at the linebacker position, and Demetrius Knight could very well be that. I like Demetrius Knight a lot, but if I'm picking between the two, I'm taking Carson, and I just again, UCLA, you keep him in LA, blah blah blah, lame storylines that I point out repeatedly throughout the draft process. He's got the flow for SoCal, you know, the flowing blonde locks here
Sure.
and everything else.
Sure.
That's literally, I promise you, I swear on my
Good
life,
fit.
that's exactly who I was going to take.
I believe you because when I was thinking about it, I was like, I guarantee this.
And I
already
listened to you talk about Connerly first, and I hope that you were going to come back to like Darius Alexander and say something about how he reminds you of Aaron Donald or something
Aaron
like
Donald,
that. I hope that was
yeah.
going to be your second guy, or you were going to get spicy and say Gray Zabel makes sense here because he's just a whatever.
Yep. Nope. Good old Carson, baby.
But we should have known. I should have known from the beginning.
I like it, man. That's a good pick for sure. You're gonna hate my next pick.
Probably, if it's who I think it is.
Well, I mean, to be honest, there was 3 things that I was like, okay. If Roger Rosengard didn't have such a damn good season at right tackle, I would give them Membu without even a question at right tackle. But I think Rosengard had a really good year.
Yep.
So I don't think they need to. As much as I think, okay, they can move him inside and play left guard. They think they can use left guard help. It's kind of silly, man. I'm just gonna Starks.
You said Starks, right?
Yeah, because you pair him with Hamilton. Like they're different enough because Hamilton, you could literally just play split safety at that point. Like you literally could just have them both have the same role on opposite sides of the field and roam the other half of the. Like you don't have to just have one guy doing one thing and the other one. Like they could almost play the same position and you just rotate them depending on what the offense is doing. And I think that would be just that. That's what I'm doing. I don't need to explain anymore.
Well, and again, let's just talk about this real quick. The Ravens' defense was horrible this year until they put Kyle Hamilton back at that center field safety role.
Correct. It gives them flexibility.
They completely flipped it on their head. I think they were the #1 defense then for the remainder of the year.
They were top 3 at least.
The two different, unique parts of their season. With Hamilton in the box, they were a bottom 10 defense, I'm pretty sure. And with him deep, they were a top 3.
That's because their safeties were Bo Braid and Ardarius Washington.
And they brought back
Marcus Williams.
Yes.
Who,
so, yeah, 100%. I'm not saying this is rocket science. Anybody that was looking at the Ravens defense could clearly see that their safeties at the top were burnt toast. Like Raheem Moore playing back there would have been better for them than anything that they had for the first half of the season. But, Kyle Hamilton is just a difference maker type of player. And they drafted him at 14 a couple of years ago, knowing that. So, for them to have tried to play him in the box role, that's fine if you have the flexibility to do that, but they just didn't. They needed a difference maker at the safety position, and Kyle Hamilton had the capabilities of being that guy. So, adding Malachi Starks to the defense then basically is just an FU in the face of everybody else in the league of saying, all right, we didn't have the capability of having fun with our defensive joker, so now we have 2. Eat it.
Have fun. Yep.
They can do a lot more bluffs with defensive back blitzes. Starks and Hamilton also, by the way, have plenty enough speed that if they want to bluff like they're blitzing off the edge, they can still drop back in coverage on a tight end or a running back and run with them. They have the ability to both be physical in terms of their tackling abilities. They both have the ability to play that deep center field role in the safeties position. If they got another guy at some point this offseason that could play in the box as a linebacker, they could roll out Malachi Starks and Kyle Hamilton as 2 deep safeties and just say good luck. Each take a half of a field and figure it out. And obviously I'm upset right now because as a Steelers fan, that sounds horrible to me. And I'm going to really hope that Malachi Starks goes earlier than this. But every freaking year, the Ravens get a guy that I like a lot who just falls right into their lap. And that's exactly what happened in this mock, and I can't hate it. that happened last week too. I don't remember who I took for them, but it was somebody that also pissed me off.
James Pierce.
That's exactly who it was. Who I took at 14, 10. I took James Pierce at 10 in this mock draft, and he fell to the Ravens at 27 last week.
Guess where Malachi Starks went last week? He went top 10 as well. You took him at what, 7? I think to the Jets.
Did I? I am insane in the head if I did, but I probably did. You're probably not wrong.
You did. But still, I'm just saying, like, they got, they had someone fall to them.
It happens every freaking year, dude, and it's not something that I can ever tolerate or deal with. I don't understand how it happens so consistently. It's the same thing with the Eagles. Every year, the Eagles get somebody that they should not be within, like...
Because they don't overthink it, most of the
Eagles should be not allowed within, like, 50 feet of
a Georgia player?
Of any player, really. Of, like, any player with any sort of talent. They should not be allowed within a certain radius. But every year, they wind up getting somebody that just... It's like the Chiefs, it's the Ravens, and it's the Eagles. Every single year winds up with somebody that they shouldn't be able to get. The Bills are stupid for trading with the Chiefs every single year. It always bites them.
You're not wrong.
Anyway,
not wrong.
I'm going to get off my soapbox now and try to figure out who the Lions are going to take here. And try to convince myself that it's not going to be Gray Zabel.
Bite kneecaps, baby. He's a kneecap biter.
Honestly, if Schlesinger was here, I could see that. Lining up with Jack Campbell would be disgusting.
If Malachi Starks is there, I can see it too, just because best player. Him and Brian Branch. Why not? I can see Scorton too if they don't go edge. He's the type of edge they would like.
Actually, I guess I'm on the depth chart. I don't really want a roster.
I mean, I think besides interior offensive line, it's got to be defense.
I'm just trying to think. Does DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil should not stop me from going Derek Harmon here, right?
For them, no.
I mean, they generated no pass rush once Aiden Hutchinson got hurt.
Agreed. Darius Alexander, I could even see.
Darius Alexander, I could see taking one of the other edge rushers too. Oh my God, Jack Sawyer with Aiden Hutchinson would be so good.
Yep. I like that one too.
I'm taking Derek Harmon. I'm not going to think about it too much longer because I think if I do, it's going to just hurt me. I think that they probably address edge in the offseason in some capacity, whether it's in the draft, whether it's in free agency or trading. It's very possible that they haven't yet and that they should be taking an edge rusher here. But that interior defensive line is also a weak point, and they have not proven to me that they can stay healthy. So, yeah, I'm just going to take Harmon for him, and it is what it is. Good pick.
No, that's a really good pick. They need some more juice on that on the front for sure on defense. So, man, yeah, he doesn't stop me from taking. No. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go Armand Membu here, right? I think they have been kind of looking for tackles ever since they lost Trent Williams. Brandon Coleman looked okay at left tackle, and Andrew Wiley, I just think, is very overrated at right tackle. And I don't remember if he was in a long contract, but I remember reading that they could get out of it if they wanted to. So I think Membu's just too good of a value here, and they need to pair Jaden Daniels with, you pair your young quarterbacks with wide receivers and tackles. So wide receivers I like on the board. There's a couple guys that I would be okay with them taking if they would just love them. But I think the drop off between the is Connerly still on the board? He is. Man, I missed Connerly. No, I'm gonna stick with Membu because I think they like Coleman at left tackle at least enough, and Wiley I think was pretty bad last year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Membu. I'm gonna stick with what I had.
Perfect.
I could see it go either way, but
yeah, I agree. I think that it's just something that they would do. It looks like they do have an out on Wiley this year, so they could get out of that contract in some capacity. I don't know if it's just a straight up cutting him or how much he would have guaranteed or any of that, but Spot Trek says that there's a potential out this year, so they could definitely cut bait. And also, he's only under contract for 2025, so even if they didn't cut bait with him, they could keep him under contract for this 1 year. It's a 3-year, $24 million deal, so I don't remember how much it was that he's on the books for this year. But with such a big cap increase, they could just keep him for depth at this point too.
Right.
You know, picking an offensive tackle at 29, there's no guarantees that they're going to be a day one starter for you. So having the ability to say, okay, we at least feel comfortable with the guy that we have at right tackle heading into the season if we need him, and hopefully M'Bendu is a guy that they can plug in at some point, maybe mid-training camp or at some point during the season if they feel like they're just getting beat to that side too often. Obviously, having a quarterback with mobility like Jayden Daniels is nice because you can kind of get around it a little bit and make some competitive plays even with lackluster offensive line play, but bolstering that to prevent Jayden Daniels from taking hits behind the line of scrimmage, since he's definitely going to be taking hits once he gets past the line of scrimmage because he doesn't know how to slide, is probably a pretty smart maneuver for a team that would love to capitalize on their, young, good quarterback and not get him killed like they did the last one. So, anyway, the Bills are tricky because the needs that they have listed here, I don't necessarily really feel like are indicative of the needs of the team overall. Not to say that they couldn't use those positions, but I think that Keon Coleman played well enough this year that I don't feel like they desperately need another wide receiver this early. They definitely should add one, whether it's in free agency, whether it's later in the draft, but there's enough depth here that I don't feel like I need to go with a Jack Betch this early or a Alik Yomenor. I don't remember how you pronounce his name, so I apologize to his family and anybody else who respects him. Crush's power just went out, so apologies if there's a little bit of a delay in him getting back in here. But if it takes a little bit, I'm just going to text him who I'm taking. So I'll talk through my decision. I'm going to take Nick Scorton here. And the reason for that is because I think that they didn't... Same thing with the Lions this year. They did not generate enough pressure from their defensive line and edges in particular. They missed out on a lot of production. Von Miller, I think, is a cut candidate. And again, that Texas A&M edge rusher there in Scorton just makes sense as a fit. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do here. I already know what Crusher's going to pick, and he just texted me that he was going to take him too. So Josh Connerly here to the Chiefs. Again, he just makes too much sense. When you're looking at the Chiefs, they got decimated by the Eagles' pass rush in that Super Bowl. And it was pretty clear, pretty apparent that their offensive tackles just were not going to cut it. And that's something that they have to address. They have to do something with. So with Connerly still on the board here, and frankly, he probably should be gone. But he's not for the sake of this particular exercise. So he's going to be the 31st pick here, which leads me into the Eagles to close it out. Which is tough because, again, they are a team that doesn't have any inherent holes, really, when you're looking at it. And I think last week, Crush took Darius Alexander, and that's just what I'm going to do again here. Again, I don't want to bury the lead. I've been live now for over 3 hours, so thank you guys for sticking with me. I really do appreciate it. If you're still here and you're hanging out, thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed already and you would like to see more of these style of live streams and some additional content, I'm going to be doing some more over the next few weeks. I think YouTube's going to be the platform for these streams moving forward, and I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on uploading some videos as well. With MLB The Show coming out, in just a couple weeks here, and some more stuff that I have going on. In the past year to year and a half or so, I've started developing a little bit of a bourbon collection, or a selection, as you might want to say. So I may look into doing some content with that as well. The IRL mock draft kind of content. I might do some fantasy stuff. I talked about earlier in the stream. Potentially doing a YouTube video where we look at potential Myles Garrett trades, what the packages could look like for teams looking to make a move for him, what they might be giving up. So there's going to be a lot of content, I think, that I'm going to be pumping out over the next few weeks. This YouTube channel has been something that's been on my mind since 2020, and I just have not gotten around to doing it yet. Again, that's on me, and I do apologize for that, but we're here now. This is kind of my last great bastion, so to speak, of something that I really wanted to do at some point just as a hobby and have fun with it. I really enjoy these mock draft streams. Crush is obviously a very, very close friend of mine. And we think very similarly, as you can tell by the fact that half the time when he's talking about a guy, I start highlighting him before he can get the words out. But if you guys appreciate this sort of content, wouldn't mind dropping a like and, again, hitting that subscribe button. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you for being here and hanging out with me. But just to close it out with the Eagles picking here, you don't know what's going to happen with Brandon Graham, and you have some other questions there on that defensive line as well. Obviously, if Zach Bond leaves, I think linebacker catapults to the top of a potential needs list. If Carson is still here, I think that would be a great selection for him. Demetrius Knight is just another guy that I think is very solid in that defensive front seven. But I'm going to take Darius Alexander. He just feels like an Eagles type of player. I'm very high on him, 6'4", 310. But he moves so much more agilely and just quickly, both laterally and pass rush, just the ability to get instant pressure. It's incredibly impressive to me what he's able to do. And again, we talked about this earlier, watching tape of him at the Senior Bowl. We talked about that with Mike Green earlier, who went to the Colts. But Darius Alexander had an incredible showing there, and combining that with his college tape, he is a very impressive player. And just that kind of depth that the Eagles have historically liked to have. They rotate through guys consistently, being able to take advantage of mismatches that they might have, keeping guys well rested, so on and so forth. So I think that he is a guy that is going to pair well if Milton Williams does leave in free agency. Obviously, you have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, but you might also be losing Brandon Graham to retirement. You might be losing Josh Sweat. You might be losing Milton Williams. So they're just a team that every year they find ways to navigate their cap situation and add an influx of players through free agency, as well as the draft, and just finding ways to replace those positions of need. It seems like they always decide to target offensive line and defensive line early when they identify those as a position of potential weakness, or even positions where they would be looking to potentially replace a guy who might be retiring or leaving the team in the next couple of years. So I would not be surprised at all to see them go defensive lineman here. I wouldn't be surprised if there was one of these couple of offensive tackles in Connerly or Membu. I could see them going there too. Obviously, these things will slowly develop over time as the landscape changes and as things develop with what free agency and trades bring. Like we were talking about, there's a decent chance that the Eagles aren't drafting here if they make a trade with a couple of these picks to add a Myles Garrett to that team, which would be disgusting. The reigning Super Bowl champs adding one of the best defensive players in the league. Yeah, fly Eagles fly. Fly Eagles fly for sure. But again, thank you guys so much for being here. Again, Crush's internet cut out, or power cut out here at the end, so apologies for that lapse, but appreciate you all for hanging out and having a great time with me. I appreciate each and every one of you. Have a great weekend here coming up. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be back at it again. I think next week we might roll out the first 2-round mock. We'll see what we're thinking. we'll have to speed it up a little bit because it was a 3-hour stream here for round 1. But we've gotten familiar with some of these guys, and maybe next week we'll do another 1-round mock as the kind of combine wrap-up type thing, and I might do a separate little piece of content here over the next week or so to just do a little combine wrap-up for you guys, to kind of shine some light on some of these guys who have a good physical performance, which again, like I mentioned, the combine should not be everything. There's teams that kind of live and die by the combine, and that's kind of been proven to not necessarily be the most successful thing year in and year out, but it certainly worked for other teams as well. So again, thank you guys. If you're still here and you haven't yet already subscribed, please do so that you can make sure that you're here for any future content that I'm able to put out for you. I appreciate it greatly. Have a great night.